3 hours of silent rebellion against meaning to fall asleep to. What if the stars never cared about the names we gave them? Somewhere, between the ticking of a forgotten clock and the sigh of a soul too tired to search, a quiet rebellion begins. Not with fists, not with noise, but with stillness, with letting go. Tonight, we will not chase meaning. We will not try to solve the puzzle of existence. Instead, we will lie gently within the question itself. This is not your typical meditation. It is a soft defiance against the pressure to explain, to achieve, to know. Imagine your thoughts like leaves in a stream. No need to hold, no need to follow. Just watch. Just be. A philosopher might say you're retreating from absurdity. A physicist might say you're folding into the waveform of pure presence. Whatever the name, it doesn't matter now. Close your eyes and let the rebellion begin with silence. The whisper that refused to make sense. There is a kind of quiet that doesn't comfort. It unsettles. The kind that arrives when the lights are off and you're alone with a single question. Not shouted, not even spoken. Just there, like breath on a mirror. Why am I here? That question doesn't arrive with fanfare. It seeps in, through ceiling cracks, through unfinished sentences, through glances at strangers that last just a second too long. You could be brushing your teeth, waiting at a red light, or lying on your side, eyes closed, but nowhere near sleep. And suddenly, it's there, uninvited, patient, ancient. Someone once stood outside a laundromat and said softly to a stranger, "Funny, isn't it? We fold clothes like we fold meaning, hoping everything ends up neat." And they both laughed, but neither really knew why. This isn't a riddle that needs solving. It's a rhythm that just plays. The search for meaning, for understanding, is not wrong, but it can be exhausting, like chasing a balloon that drifts just out of reach, always hovering a few inches past your fingertips. You run harder, you try longer. But what if it's not meant to be caught? In this space, we're not here to find meaning. We're here to listen to what rises when we stop looking. Silence isn't absence, it's presence, without the need to explain itself. The rebellion isn't loud, it's not angry, it doesn't demand to be heard. It waits. A woman once leaned against a lamppost late at night, headphones in, eyes closed. When asked what she was listening to, she smiled and said, "Nothing." That's the point. She wasn't escaping sound, she was resting inside it. Not music, not noise, just the wide, open quiet. Sometimes the most radical act isn't seeking, it's surrender. Not in weakness, but in grace. A refusal to turn every shadow into a symbol. A release from the compulsion to decode every sigh, every coincidence, every glance from the sky. Let's allow that. Let's make space for the unformed, the unfinished, the unexplained. Not because it will reward us with revelation, but because it already is enough. And maybe meaning was never missing. Maybe it's just quieter than we thought. Now breathe in gently. Hold for a moment, not for control, but for stillness, as if you're cupping water in your hands. Let the need to know loosen. Let the question lose its sharpness. Because in this night, not all doors are meant to be opened. Some are just meant to stand there, silent and unmoving, reminding you that you are alive enough to wonder. And that's the beginning, not of the answer, but of rest. Let's go there. The paradox of purpose. Close your eyes, float into the question, not to solve it, but to soften inside it. If everything needs a purpose, then what is the purpose of needing purpose? It seems harmless enough, maybe even noble. But peel the question gently, and you'll feel its weight. That invisible ache beneath modern living, where every moment feels like it must be justified, productive, or earned. From the moment we learn to walk, we are nudged toward destinations. What do you want to be when you grow up? Where are you heading? What's your plan? These questions are not malicious. They are inherited, echoes of ancestors who survived by chasing, building, achieving. Evolution rewarded those who sought more, not peace, but progress, not stillness, but motion. But here's the glitch. Evolution equipped us with the hunger to seek, not the satisfaction of arrival. So we grow up convinced that life must mean something more, something ahead, something just around the corner. And the moment we grasp it, status, love, success, it slips away, replaced by the next thing and the next. Until one day, you ask the silent question, what if I never needed a purpose to be worthy of rest? A quiet conversation floats through the dark. Do you think there's a point to all of this? Sometimes I do. Other times, I wonder if the point is just to keep wondering. Isn't that terrifying? Only if I forget how to be still. What if the purpose you've been seeking isn't something to accomplish, but something to embody? Maybe your existence doesn't have to be explained like a math problem. Maybe it's more like a melody, meant to be heard, not solved. A breath, not a blueprint. Consider this. If the universe itself doesn't rush, if stars take billions of years to form and rivers carve canyons drop by drop, why should your worth be measured in immediate milestones? What if you're not a project to complete, but a presence to live? Stillness does not mean stagnation. It means presence. It means not outsourcing your peace to a future that may never come. And maybe that's why the paradox exists, to wake you up from the treadmill of more and remind you that being is already enough. So take your time. There's nothing you must fix right now, no problem to solve, no meaning to manufacture, just a space to inhabit. You are here, and that's enough. Let the next idea find you. You don't have to chase it. Breathe, float, be. The clock that never asked why. Time doesn't look back. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't carry regrets in its pocket or wear a badge of meaning on its sleeve. It passes, not in protest, not in pride, but in silence. The second hand moves, not because it believes in progress, but because that's what it does. A quiet rebellion of motion without motive. You sit in your room, lights low, ceiling fan humming like a lullaby you've long forgotten the words to. On the wall, the clock ticks, not loudly, just there. You notice it tonight for the first time in weeks, its rhythm unchanging, indifferent to your mood, your plans, your questions. You think, has it ever cared? One evening, two people meet in a laundromat, the kind that smells like detergent and distant sighs. One folds shirts like memories, slow and precise. The other stares at the spinning dryer. You ever think that machine's got it right? You mean just spinning? Yeah, not asking what it's spinning for. They both laugh, not because it's funny, but because something about it feels true. We, on the other hand, fill our days with little explanations. Why we're late, why we bought that coffee, why we didn't return that call. But if you lean close enough to your breath, you'll notice it never explains itself. It just continues. Inhale, exhale. No meaning, just rhythm, just being. So what if you tried that for a while? Not forever, just tonight. What if you didn't narrate your thoughts like a voiceover to a movie that never asked for one? What if you let the clock tick without tying each sound to something deeper? There's a kind of softness in surrender. Not defeat, but quiet. The kind of silence that's not empty, but full of permission. Permission to not analyze, to not conclude, just to exist. The same way dusk doesn't explain why it fades, or waves why they return to shore. They simply do. You walk past a bus stop. A woman sits with her grocery bags, eyes closed, head tilted back. You don't know if she's praying, sleeping, or listening to the wind, but you don't ask. Somehow, it would feel rude. You respect her moment, undefined as it is, and maybe that's what life could be. Moments we don't have to decode. Maybe the clock isn't counting down. Maybe it's just moving, like you, not toward meaning, not away from it, just moving. Maybe it's enough to feel that motion without explaining it, like rain on windows or the way shadows stretch. Let time pass through you now, not as something to track, not as something to manage, just as something that happens and continues and softens. And if you've drifted a little, that's all right. Sleep is another kind of rebellion against the need to always know. The next idea will arrive when it's ready, and you'll already be there, resting quietly, like the clock that never asked why. The stone that refused to become a story. Some things simply are. They do not ask to be named. They do not beg to be understood. A small stone lying by the side of the road, silent, unshaped by story, asks nothing of the world. And yet, the moment our gaze falls upon it, the mind begins its familiar ritual. We imagine it was kicked there by a child, or broken off a cliff, or perhaps it carries the weight of 1,000 forgotten years. We project, we narrate, we assign meaning where none was requested. But what if the stone doesn't want a story? What if it is content simply being silent, solid, unmoved? Two voices whisper softly in a quiet kitchen late at night. Do you ever feel like you're supposed to mean something all the time? The other stirs a cup of tea. All the time. Like I have to explain why I exist before I even have a chance to breathe. We carry this pressure like a second skin, to be known, to be interpreted, to fit. It's as if the human condition comes with a built-in narrator that refuses to let life be quiet. But there is wisdom in stillness, in resisting the pull to always form a plot line. The stone by the roadside doesn't grieve its simplicity. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need a purpose to validate its presence. And maybe, neither do you. To imagine life without narrative feels like a rebellion, a silent protest against the machinery of identity. If you stopped explaining yourself, even for a moment, who would you become? Maybe that's the point. You wouldn't become anything. You'd simply be. And that is terrifying. Because we are meaning makers. We see shapes in clouds. We search for omens in tea leaves. We assign symbolism to the smallest things. But perhaps we're simply afraid of the void. Afraid that if something doesn't mean anything, it might not matter. But the stone matters. Not because it tells a story, but because it exists. Without apology. Without a script. Wouldn't it be nice, one of them says, if we didn't have to be interesting all the time? The other nods, eyes softening. Maybe being real is enough. So for now, let go. Loosen the grip of needing to be understood. You don't need to justify your presence to the night. Let yourself become the stone, quiet, whole, beyond the need for narration. Inhale gently and rest, not as a character in a tale, but as a presence that needs no plot. The next thought will arrive when it's ready. Until then, stay smooth, stay still. the dreamer who forgot the dream. Sometimes the mind wanders into places it won't bring back. You wake up with no story, no image, no trace, only a residue, a subtle ache in the chest, or the sense that something soft and ancient brushed past your soul in the night. No monsters, no adventures, just the undeniable feeling that you were somewhere, and now you are not. Do you ever wake up feeling like you've lost something you never had? Every morning, she says, pulling her blanket closer, and I never know what it was. There are nights when we become strangers, even to our own subconscious. The dream unfolds behind closed curtains, and though you lived it, touched it, maybe even wept inside it, morning offers no proof. You sit at the edge of your bed, palms open, as if the memory might still trickle in. But nothing comes. Nothing but the feeling, a mood without context, a gravity that lingers. And perhaps that's the rebellion. Not everything must be remembered to be real. Not every truth has to come dressed in language. Sometimes it is the body that speaks for the soul, through a sigh, a restlessness, a longing we can't explain. It's tempting to chase meaning with a net, to demand names, reasons, explanations. But what if the deepest truths arrive not as messages, but as weather? What if they drift through us like fog, uncatchable, but utterly transforming? Maybe that dream you forgot didn't vanish. Maybe it dissolved into you, into how you looked at the mirror this morning, how you paused a little longer while brushing your teeth, how your silence now feels fuller. I can't remember my dream, he says, but all day I felt like someone had whispered to me. Maybe they did, she replies, and maybe it was you. There is a kind of peace in giving up the chase, in letting experience be enough, even if you don't carry it forward. Maybe memory was never the only way of knowing. Maybe sensation is a kind of scripture, written not in words, but in the warmth behind your ribs. So here you are, a dreamer without a dream, but not without depth, not without direction. The moment does not ask you to recall what happened, only to notice how it left you. A whisper moves through your breath. Something has shifted. Let go of recall. The next thought will not ask to be remembered, only felt. The sentence without a period. What if life never meant to conclude? What if it wasn't a story seeking an ending, but a breath that simply kept going? Quiet, circular, infinite. You see, we've been taught to crave closure, to expect a resolution at the end of each day, each chapter, each moment of pain or joy. But not everything in existence follows a neat arc. Some currents never stop. Think of a river. It doesn't ask where it ends. It doesn't pause to summarize its journey before meeting the sea. It moves, not to arrive, but because movement is its nature. Or the wind. It doesn't need applause when it hushes the trees. It comes and goes. And yet, it always remains. We often say, I just need closure, as if that's the key to peace. But perhaps peace was never found in the end of something, but in accepting that there might never be one. Do you ever feel like you need to finish everything before you sleep? I used to, but lately I wonder if that pressure is why I can't rest. The world runs on sentences without periods. The ocean doesn't stop to define its edge. The stars don't ask for finality. They burn, they drift, and sometimes they vanish silently. No punctuation, just presence. In our search for meaning, maybe we've mistaken finality for fulfillment, but finality can be harsh. It can sever. It can say, that's it, when life is softly whispering, there's more. Letting go of the need for an ending can be terrifying. It feels like floating with no anchor, but it can also be freeing. to simply be in the sentence, not knowing where the thought leads, to trust that your breath is part of a larger rhythm that doesn't need to be wrapped in a bow. I left the conversation unfinished last night, and you know what? It felt human. Like the sentence still lived between you? Yes, like it didn't need to end to be real. This is the kind of understanding that dissolves stress into softness. The realization that you don't need to resolve everything tonight. You don't need to close the book. You can rest inside the sentence. You can let it cradle you, gently, without expectation. Because maybe the sentence is still writing itself, through your breath, through the pauses between your thoughts, through the quiet awareness that nothing really needs to end for it to matter. So tonight, allow yourself to float in the story without a period. Let your thoughts meander like a stream in the dark. Let presence replace punctuation. No period, no pressure. Just you, alive in the sentence. The mirror that didn't reflect. It begins with a glance, a simple motion, the kind we make every morning, toward a mirror expecting to meet ourselves. But tonight, that mirror does not cooperate. There is no crack, no fog, no darkness. It's just empty. Not void like despair, but absent like silence in a crowded room. A mirror that offers no feedback, no shape, no confirmation that you were ever there. You pause. You shift your head slightly, waiting for your reflection to catch up. But it doesn't. Not even a blur or a shimmer. The frame is there. The surface remains. But the dialogue is gone. Why doesn't it show me? A quiet voice beside you breaks the thought. A woman in a soft cardigan stands nearby, not startled, just curious. Maybe, you say, without turning. It shows only when we're not trying to see. She doesn't laugh, but her smile is slow and understanding, like someone who's already considered the question and let it float. The absence is not frightening. It's freeing. You start to feel what it's like when no image pushes back, when you are not being watched, not being interpreted, not being turned into a story. The mirror is not failing you. It's inviting you to exist without explanation. And maybe that's what identity has always been tangled in. Reflection, echo, performance. We find ourselves in eyes, in screens, in gestures repeated and returned. But without those echoes, who are we? You walk past shop windows late at night and notice how often you search for your outline, proof that you're still real. The feedback loop is comforting, but it can also be a trap. If yourself only exists when recognized, then silence becomes a threat. And yet here, in this moment, it doesn't feel threatening. It feels light, like shrugging off a coat you didn't realize was heavy. A barista once told me, out of nowhere, that she feels most herself during the quiet cleanup after closing. When no one's watching, she said, I'm not reacting. I just move. That stuck with me, because maybe the mirror isn't gone. Maybe it just stopped being reactive. Maybe it's asking you to feel yourself without visual proof, without applause, without the burden of being you for anyone else's sake. Do you miss it? The woman asks again. No, you answer, your voice low like a lullaby. I think I'm still here, just quieter. She nods and walks on. No goodbyes, no need for them. In this space, this pause between reflection and recognition, you start to soften. There's a stillness behind the glass, not cold, not hollow, just still, like the breath before dawn, like a thought that hasn't formed yet. And now, you can close your eyes, let your image dissolve. There is no one watching, no need to perform. You are not disappearing. You are becoming. The The next segment waits without judgment. Just breathe. Just presence. The God that stayed silent. You cried out for help, for meaning, for something, and the sky. It didn't scream back. It didn't send thunder or visions or even a whisper. It just remained still, quiet, unmoved. And in that silence, your heart began to ache in a way words can't explain. There's a name for this: divine hiddenness, a term whispered in theology and philosophy alike. It speaks of the aching paradox of a God who feels absent when you need him most, of prayers that rise like smoke but never seem to descend as rain. It's not about doubt. It's about absence. You believe. You reach. But the hand you're grasping for remains invisible. Late at night, wrapped in dim light and thought, two voices emerge, intimate and unsure. "Do you think he hears me?" one says, eyes lost in the ceiling. "I don't know," the other replies, softer than breath. "But I think maybe it's not about being heard. Maybe it's about still speaking." The silence becomes its own kind of presence. Not comforting, not cruel, just there. And you begin to wonder if perhaps it's a space, not a void. A space where your questions echo, not to be erased, but to be held. Perhaps this stillness isn't abandonment. Perhaps it's the kind of love that refuses to interfere. The kind that lets you grow, not because it doesn't care, but because it trusts you. Like a parent stepping back so their child can walk, or fall, or rise. Some days, that thought feels like hope. Other days, it just deepens the ache. But the ache, too, becomes sacred. It sharpens you, it humbles you, and strangely, it connects you to others who've whispered the same desperate words into dark skies, to centuries of seekers who heard nothing but kept calling. You begin to see silence not as a wall, but as a mirror. It reflects your persistence, your pain, your courage, and slowly, it teaches you something terrifying and tender at once. Not all answers come in the form of answers. Some arrive as endurance, as patience, as presence. "Maybe the silence is the answer," one voice says much later. The other nods, almost to themselves. Or maybe it's an invitation to keep listening, to keep living, even without clarity. And in that moment, neither feels quite as alone. Let the question stay unanswered. Let it become a companion, not a burden. Let the silence wrap around you like fog, not to blind you, but to soften the need to know. Sometimes the silence is sacred, and sometimes it says more than words ever could. The universe that never introduced itself. You've been here for years, breathing its air, walking its gravity, aging under its sky. But the universe never greeted you, not even once. It never offered a name or a nod, not a sign to say, "You belong here." It just was, and so were you. Late at night, when the city quiets and the sky clears, you can see it. Stars smeared like whispers across a black canvas. Galaxies swirling like secrets. Planets turning without pause. And yet, there's no note left on your doorstep. No cosmic narrator stepping in to say, "Here's why it all exists." You live inside a grand, silent cathedral, and the architect never showed up. A woman once said this to a stranger at a laundromat. "Funny how the machines tell you how long they'll take, but the universe never does." The man smiled. "Maybe that's what makes it sacred," he replied. Neither of them spoke again, but they both stared out the window a little longer than usual, at nothing. Or maybe, at everything. We've tried to coax an answer from the stars, through ancient myths, through science so precise it can predict the wobble of a faraway moon, through stories we pass down like heirlooms. We were made for this. We were chosen. We've sculpted meaning out of stone, sky, and silence. And still, the cosmos keeps quiet. It spins and stretches and expands without applause or acknowledgement. And so we watch, not because it watches back, but because something in us insists on the watching. A quiet hope that beauty doesn't need a reply to be real. You love your dog even when it doesn't speak your language. You water plants knowing they'll never say thank you. And when someone asks you, "Why are you crying at the stars?" you just say, "I don't know. They feel like something I once knew." This one-way relationship between us and the cosmos, it doesn't ask for resolution, just presence. Maybe the meaning isn't something we're supposed to receive, but something we give, freely, without transaction. Like leaving flowers on a stranger's doorstep and never ringing the bell. At a grocery store, a tired cashier once asked, "Do you believe we matter?" The woman buying oranges replied, "I don't know if we do, but I still pick the ripe ones." There's tenderness in that, a kind of reverence for the ordinary, choosing to care even when the world doesn't promise to care back. So maybe that's all this is, a quiet offering, you, existing, loving a universe that doesn't write back, and yet, still showing up. Let the stars remain strangers. Let the sky keep its secrets. You don't need an introduction to feel connected. You're allowed to stay, to watch, to wonder. And now, let your thoughts loosen. Let them float like dust through that endless silent night. You don't have to understand it all. You're not being tested. You're just here. And that might be enough. The question that grew tired of asking. There's a hush that arrives not with an answer, but with surrender. Not a loud resolution, but the soft dimming of a once burning question. What happens when even the questions grow tired? You remember how they started? Fiery, insistent, unrelenting. Who am I? What is this all for? Why pain? Why silence? Each one arriving like a knock at the door of your soul. For a time, they felt urgent, necessary, like breathing. They gave you identity. They lit up the corridors of thought, even as they haunted you. But then something shifted. Not all at once, not with drama, but slowly, like twilight folding into night. The edges of your questions blurred, their fire dimmed, and strangely, in their quiet, a different kind of clarity whispered its way in. Not clarity like a solution, but clarity like space, a widening, a stillness. "What's wrong with me?" one voice asked gently. "Why don't I care so much anymore?" Another voice replied, soft but grounded. "Maybe caring so much hurt. Maybe you're just tired, not broken." "Is that bad?" "No," the answer breathed. "Maybe it's sacred. This is not apathy. It's not giving up. It's something quieter, more reverent. A holy kind of fatigue, the kind that only arrives after you've carried your questions for years, over mountains of self-doubt, through deserts of longing, into storm after storm of not knowing. Maybe peace doesn't walk in with triumphant trumpets. Maybe it tiptoes into the room when your mind finally lets go of the need to solve everything. When it lies down, not in defeat, but in grace, in patience, in the permission to rest. And this rest isn't the end of curiosity, it's its evolution. Because there is a knowing deeper than asking, a knowing that arrives not in words, but in silence, not in thought, but in being. Tonight, allow yourself to reach that place, where the questions no longer demand your energy. Let them sleep beside you, like children finally safe in the arms of something larger than understanding. Let the ache of why exhale, Let what if close its eyes. Let how loosen its grip. You don't need to carry every mystery tonight. The sky isn't asking for answers. It's just here to watch with you. Tomorrow, the questions might rise again. Maybe they'll burn a little brighter. Or maybe they'll return in new forms. But for now, let them rest. They've carried you far enough. And you have earned this stillness. The logic that outran itself. The mind, in its pursuit of safety, builds walls out of reason. It sketches neat diagrams and draws sharp conclusions, hoping that if it names everything, nothing can hurt it. But somewhere along the journey, the map begins to fold in on itself. A truth appears, and then questions its own foundation. Another rule is written only to undo the rule before it. Logic, so noble and precise, starts to chase its own tail. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. There is a kind of silence born from this, a hush that enters when you realize your thoughts are too sharp to hold. Like a glass blade, it cuts but can't carry. Did you ever solve it? She stirred her tea slowly, eyes tracing the swirl. Only until I asked why I needed it solved, he replied. And then, I stopped needing an answer, just needed to sleep. In the world of pure logic, paradox blooms like a flower in reverse. Beautiful, but unsettling. Gödel once whispered to the mathematicians of his time that even within the most airtight system, there are truths too wild to cage. Ohm statements, he said, are true, but forever beyond the reach of proof. Like standing at the edge of a mirror that reflects itself and trying to find where the reflection ends. And what does this mean for us? The ones lying in bed with a head full of tangled questions? Maybe it means the pressure can lift now. You don't need to solve the unprovable tonight. You don't need to win against the maze. A boy once asked his grandfather, "If logic can't hold everything, what can?" The old man tapped his chest gently. "Not this," he said, "but maybe something close to it. Maybe meaning isn't a straight line. Maybe it curves, like the path of a falling leaf. No destination, just motion. Maybe meaning whispers in the spaces between questions, not in the answers themselves. You can let that idea settle, like dust in warm light." A stranger held the elevator door for her, not knowing her name, not needing a reason. "You look like someone who needed a pause," he said. And she smiled, as if he'd read a sentence she hadn't spoken aloud. This is how it feels to step outside the circle, not with rebellion, but with rest. So let your thoughts soften. Let the logic rest its weary limbs. It's done enough running for tonight. And if your mind still lingers at the edge of a thought that doesn't close, let it linger. Not everything must resolve. Some things just breathe. Now, take that breath with it. Let intuition walk with you now. The next thought doesn't need a reason, only room. The smile that meant nothing. There are smiles that live in silence, not because they're shy or sad or even mysterious, but because they don't belong to a story. They pass through like wind over skin, felt but never captured. Imagine walking down a quiet street just before night folds into itself. The street lamps flicker. A stranger walks by. Your eyes meet. And there it is, a smile. Quick, unscripted, gone. It means nothing. And yet, it lingers. We're trained to search for the why. Why did they smile? Were they kind, curious, lonely? Did they know you? Did you remind them of someone? We build whole narratives from fragments like this, all in the name of understanding. But perhaps not every moment needs understanding. Maybe some are allowed to simply be, like a dropped coin that no one picks up, not lost, not found, just there. Two people share a bench under the glow of a late evening sky. Did you see that girl smile at you? I did. What do you think it meant? Maybe nothing. Is that sad? Not at all. Maybe it's nice to have something that doesn't ask for anything back. There's a soft rebellion in moments like this. They resist being turned into symbols. No backstory, no foreshadowing, just presence. Just a flash of light between souls who don't owe each other a beginning or an end. Think of how many smiles you've given that were never meant to be remembered. On escalators, in checkout lines, at crosswalks. Think of how many you've received without realizing it. Those are the unsung notes in the music of everyday life. You don't replay them. You don't need to. They are the silence between thoughts, the breath between sentences, the heartbeat between questions. A smile that means nothing might actually mean everything your overthinking mind has been trying to escape. It doesn't beg for analysis. It doesn't want to be more. It just was, and that's enough. So tonight, if one appears in your dream or flashes behind your eyelids just before sleep, don't try to grasp it. Let it go. Let it fade the way it came. No meaning, no story, only light. The word that forgot its meaning. There comes a moment, late in the night, when the words themselves begin to blur. They arrive out of habit, not meaning. A thought forms, truth, maybe, or love, and it feels heavy, but hollow, like a bell rung too many times, now only echoing its own memory. Words, once carved with care, have grown smooth from overuse. We say them because we must, not because we still believe they carry what they once held. Hope used to lift, freedom used to shake the bones. Now they pass through lips like wind through curtains, gentle but formless. Two friends stand at the edge of a crosswalk, the red signal pulsing like a heartbeat. You ever say a word so many times it sounds fake? Yeah. Yesterday I said real like 10 times in one sentence. By the end, it felt like chewing air. What do you think that means? Maybe it means the word was never real to begin with, just a habit pretending to be a truth. Language, after all, is just a net we throw over the ocean of feeling, hoping to catch something we can show to someone else. But sometimes the net comes back empty, or full of weeds, or too tangled to hold anything at all. We call that failure. But maybe it's freedom. Maybe when words forget what they're supposed to mean, they finally let us feel again. Not through definitions, but through presence. Not through precision, but through pause. A man at a cafe fumbles with a compliment. I think you're, I don't know, just nice. His voice falters, but the moment holds. And strangely, it lands harder than any poem, because it wasn't dressed up. It didn't try too hard, it simply was. There's something sacred about that kind of fumbling. The silence that cradles broken language. The quiet between syllables where real connection hides. Like sunlight behind thin curtains, the glow comes not from what's said, but what isn't. Perhaps this is the quiet rebellion our hearts have been waiting for, to stop reciting the old mantras, to let love be more than 4 letters, to feel hope without declaring it, to live truth rather than define it. Let the words slip, let their edges dull, let them return to what they were before we tamed them. Sounds, rhythms, half-finished thoughts humming in the chest. Tonight, as your breath slows and your eyes begin to wander inward, allow the language to dissolve. Let it fall like chalk in the rain. You don't have to hold on to it. There is nothing to explain anymore. Only a rhythm to follow. Only a silence to feel. Only you, beneath the words. the thought that refused to finish. There's a strange comfort in thoughts that never finish, like mist that begins to rise but never settles into a cloud. These are not failed ideas, nor are they broken lines of logic. They are fragments that drift, invitations whispered, never shouted. There's a peculiar beauty in this refusal to complete, like a song that fades before the final chord, or a sentence that stops just before revealing its meaning. Wait, what was I just thinking? I'm not sure. It felt important, but it slipped. Two voices, two minds brushing against something profound, then losing grip. Not from carelessness, but because some thoughts are not built to be held. They're not answers to be captured. They are the breeze that brushes the curtains and moves on. That moment when you open your mouth to speak and forget what you meant to say, that might be the universe's way of reminding you that silence too holds intelligence. We often label these moments as distractions. We apologize for them, try to reclaim what was lost. But perhaps the mind's refusal to complete is a kind of mercy. What if distraction is not disorder, but a form of deliverance? A release from the pressure to solve, conclude, define, to finish. The very act of chasing completion, of wrapping every thought in a bow, may be what keeps us from resting, from simply being. The universe doesn't end its sentences. It suggests, it hints, it dances on the edge of meaning. Galaxies spin without needing closure. Trees grow without declaring purpose. Why should our thoughts be any different? A memory flares in your head, a childhood glimpse, a smell, a face, and then, just as suddenly, it's gone. And yet, some part of you feels lighter, as if the thought served its purpose not by finishing, but by passing through. Do you ever feel like the best ideas are the ones that vanish before you can write them down? All the time. And maybe that's the point. There's peace in that, in letting the mind breathe without boundaries, in trusting that what's unfinished might be more true than what is forced to conclude, that some thoughts are better felt than finalized, like echoes, like glimmers, like sleep. So as your mind floats between ideas, let go of the need to arrive. Let this thought end mid-sentence and allow yourself to drift with it, not to a destination, but to the gentle rhythm of almost. The rebel that sat down. There's a kind of defiance that doesn't need a flag, no anthem, no stage, just the quiet act of doing nothing. Somewhere in the noise of your day, between alerts, ambitions, and endless justification, there is a chair. Not a throne, not a podium, just a chair. You don't rise, you don't explain. You sit, and the world flinches. Rebellion, they say, is motion, marches, words shouted until hoarse, change announced with applause. But the most subversive thing you can do in a world obsessed with progress is pause. Sit down, not in surrender, but in refusal. Refusal to chase every meaning. Refusal to fix yourself constantly. Refusal to answer every demand for productivity. Two strangers waited at a bus stop. One asked, "You not headed anywhere?" The other replied, "Maybe I am. But maybe being still is exactly where I'm supposed to go." Neither smiled, but the silence between them softened. Stillness doesn't mean stagnation. It means stepping off the treadmill of reaction, of proving, of becoming. You're allowed to rest without guilt, to not chase, to not explain why you need a moment of nothing. Have you noticed? Silence confuses systems. A still body unsettles the frantic. A soft no unravels loud expectations. Even a deep breath can be a protest. Sometimes even your heartbeat slows in solidarity with your rebellion, like the universe itself is lowering the volume, leaning in, whispering, "Finally." The chair becomes more than furniture. It becomes a boundary, a sacred perimeter. Within it, you owe no performance, no permission, no pretense. It's just you and the choice not to move. Earlier today, someone looked at you funny when you didn't rush, didn't justify why you turned off your phone, didn't explain why you let that message go unanswered. But maybe stillness isn't laziness. Maybe it's literacy. In a language the rushing world forgot, there's a rhythm to rebellion when done in silence, like a stone unmoved in a river, changing the current without lifting a finger. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough tonight. Stay seated. Let the world spin if it wants. Your act of rest might be the loudest thing in the room. The next thought isn't waiting for you to chase it. It's waiting for you to stay. The answer that arrived too late. What happens when truth shows up after the story has already ended? You sit there, long after the tears dried, the argument forgotten, the sleepless nights turned into quiet routines. And suddenly, there it is. A message, a confession, an overdue clarity. The words you once begged for. But they don't land the same now. They float like dust in the morning light, visible, gentle, unnecessary. Clarity, it turns out, has its own timeline. Sometimes it's fast and piercing, sometimes slow and kind. But often, it's late. It lingers in the back room of our emotional library, waiting to be read when we've already closed the chapter. That's when answers lose their sharpness. They stop being rescue boats and become driftwood, things that might have saved us, but now only decorate the shores we've already walked away from. Why now? You ask the voice inside you. Because now is when you can see it, the voice replies. But do you still need it? You remember the days you begged for understanding, replayed conversations, imagined apologies. But life didn't wait. Healing didn't pause. You carried on. The scar formed. And here comes the answer. Gentle, genuine, but irrelevant. It's like finding an umbrella after the storm, like hearing someone say, "I loved you," when you've already forgotten the weight of their name. Would it have changed anything if I'd known this earlier? I think you already changed, even without it. Maybe we don't chase truth because it saves us. Maybe we chase it because it gives our pain shape. But when it comes too late, we're reminded that some truths are just echoes. They reflect who we were, not who we are now. And that's okay. You don't have to hold on to every revelation. Not every explanation is a gift. Some are just reminders that you outgrew the question. So tonight, let that answer arrive and let it pass. You're not required to reopen the wound just because someone finally found the words. You're allowed to nod quietly, acknowledge the delay, and keep walking. Sleep knows this. It never demands resolution. It just invites you to rest. And as the next segment approaches, soft, silent, inevitable, breathe in the knowing that you don't need to carry every answer, especially not the ones that arrived too late. The voice that echoed without a source. There are moments, especially in stillness, when something stirs inside you, but not like a memory and not like a dream. It arrives like a faint echo, a phrase you don't recall learning, a sentence that sounds too familiar, yet not yours. Maybe it's as subtle as, "You're not good enough," or "Don't trust them," or "You have to keep going." It doesn't sound like your voice, but there it is, speaking inside your head as if it belonged. And you listen, without question. Late at night, when the world lies quiet, you might wonder, who placed that voice there? Two people once waited at a bus stop under soft streetlight. One leaned against the pole, quiet, eyes half closed. The other looked over and said, "You ever hear something in your head and wonder if it came from someone else's mouth?" The first person chuckled. "All the time. Sometimes it sounds like my father. Sometimes it sounds like fear dressed in my own accent." A pause. The sound of tires passing. Then, "Do you answer it?" "Sometimes, but mostly I just let it finish." We tend to think that our thoughts are private, personal, earned. But not all of them are. Some thoughts are like inherited furniture, heavy, outdated, but too familiar to throw out. They came from childhood shame, societal myths, or silent griefs we never agreed to carry. Psychologists might call them introjects, fragments of belief systems absorbed so deeply they masquerade as our own thinking. But here, in this quiet hour, there is no need to analyze. Just notice. Notice how some thoughts rise without invitation, how they loop, not because they are true, but because they are loud. You do not need to trace their origin. You don't need to name the ancestor, the bully, the advertisement, or the silence that planted them. The voice is already fading. And here's the strange beauty. You don't have to fight it. Let it move through you like mist drifting across a field. Let it echo without responding. Let it be what it is, an old signal bouncing through the walls of your mind. There is nothing wrong with you for hearing it. There is nothing wrong with you for letting it go. Because right behind that voice is your presence, the listener, the witness, the one who is not speaking, but simply aware. And that awareness, that's you, not the voice, not the echo, but the space it passes through. It's like walking into a quiet, unfamiliar room where someone once whispered a story. The words linger in the corners, but you didn't tell that story. You're just here now, breathing in the silence it left behind. So rest now in this wide space between sound and self. You are not the noise. You are not the idea. You are the openness that holds them both. Let the voice pass like wind through an open window. The room remains. The breath continues. And the next segment is already quietly arriving, like a thought that's finally your own. The map that led back to you. You thought the world was out there, waiting, vast, mapped in constellations and distant voices. So you went searching. With trembling hands and burning questions, you marked paths across the edges of existence. There were books that promised direction, stars that whispered coordinates, people who seemed like signs, and even gods that felt like anchors. You scribbled maps in the margins of notebooks, on diner napkins, and in the quiet scars of choices that didn't quite heal. You believed the truth was elsewhere, tucked behind the next idea, the next love, the next disappointment. But slowly, as if the universe were curling in on itself, the trail began to arc back, not in shame, not in failure, but in invitation. The same signs that pointed outward now pointed inward. The more ground you covered, the more familiar it all began to feel, not like discovery, but recognition. You weren't finding something new. You were circling something ancient, something you'd buried inside yourself a long time ago. "Isn't it strange?" she said one night, brushing her fingers against the window pane. "How we think the answers are in the sky, but they're always buried under our ribs." He smiled gently, placing the kettle on the stove. "Maybe the stars are just reflections," he replied, "mirrors pretending to be maps." There's a peculiar kind of peace that comes when you stop running in loops, pretending it's a straight line. The peace of realizing you don't need another step, another page, another theory. Just stillness, just presence, just a moment to hold your own heart and say, "You were here the whole time. I just didn't recognize you through the noise." What if all maps lie, only so that you'll get lost enough to find yourself? What if destination was never the point, but distraction? Because the terrain that matters, it isn't out there, it's the one inside, the shifting landscape of memory, emotion, breath, and being. That's the ground you're meant to walk. That's the compass that never truly fails. So let your fingers loosen their grip on the paper. Let the ink fade. Let the roots vanish. You don't need them anymore. Close your eyes. The map has done its job, and its final turn leads to you. The sleep that remembered everything. It begins just before waking, when the air still feels thick with night. You stir, not from noise or movement, but from something quieter, a familiarity that shouldn't be there. Your heart pounds, your breath quickens, and you find yourself sitting in a room that doesn't exist, except in memory. But whose? A woman's voice hums in your ear, low, warm, and unplaceable. She speaks your name as if she's always known it. Her face? Blurred, but the feeling, that strange, aching comfort, is sharp enough to hurt. Have you ever felt like a dream knew you better than your life does? One person asks, staring at the ceiling after such a night. "Yeah," replies the other, pulling the blanket up. "It's like the dream remembers, and I'm the one trying to catch up." What if dreams aren't invented, but retrieved? Some scientists call it misfiring neurons, fragments stitched together by a brain bored in sleep. But that doesn't explain how real it feels, how some dreams leave behind a scent, a temperature, a grief. Not everything your body holds came from your waking life. Maybe, in that silent world behind the eyes, memory works differently. Not as timeline, but as echo. Not from your past, but someone's. Someone long gone, or never born. Carl Jung might have said it was the collective unconscious, the mind's basement, cluttered with myths and memories from generations you've never met. But if so, why do they call your name? Why do they feel so personal? A child walks down a hallway in your dream. She turns and stares as if she's known you forever. You've never seen her before. But the way she lifts her hand to wave makes your eyes sting, like remembering something lost without ever having found it in the first place. And when you wake, it's still there. Not just the image, but the emotion. That dense, wordless knowing. It stays through coffee, through work, through conversation, like a fingerprint smudged on your consciousness. "What did you dream last night?" one asks as they stand in line, distracted. "I was someone else," the other replies. "And I think I missed being me." Maybe dreams don't ask us to understand, only to feel. Maybe their purpose isn't to explain, but to remember what we never lived, or what we weren't supposed to forget. And sometimes the strangest thing isn't the dream itself, but how it leaves a lesson, not in words, in atmosphere, in sensation, as if meaning could be inhaled. Let the logic go. Let the question soften. Let the story unravel without needing to be caught. The mind remembers in ways the tongue cannot. Let the dream stay mysterious. Let it breathe beside you. If it meant something, you already feel it. And if not, you'll still fall asleep knowing you've touched a truth that didn't need a name. The signal buried in the static. There's something strangely intimate about the sound of static. At first it grates, a buzz of nothing, a hiss without shape. But if you stay with it long enough, if you soften your attention rather than sharpen it, something begins to shift. Beneath the noise, a pattern whispers, not in words, not in logic, but in sensation. It's the kind of recognition that doesn't arrive through thinking, but through a kind of internal leaning, like listening with your breath instead of your ears. "Do you hear that?" one voice says in the half-light of sleep. "Hear what?" Another replies, unsure whether to laugh or listen. "I don't know. It's like the noise is saying something." They sit in silence for a moment, both listening, not for a sentence or a message, just for a feeling, a pulse, a presence buried in the hum. That's the paradox of chaos. Even when everything seems disordered, there's often something underneath, trying to get through. White noise isn't entirely white. It holds every frequency. It holds the possibility of every voice. And maybe that's the secret. Not that the universe shouts meaning, but that it breathes it, softly, like a sleeping body under blankets of entropy. We grow up being told to filter the noise, focus, cut out distractions. But what if the distraction is the message? What if, in the blur and buzz of modern life, meaning doesn't stand apart from the chaos, but hides within it, waiting for someone to stop straining and start surrendering? A rustle of wind, a hum from the fridge, the soft tap of a clock hand you thought you'd forgotten. These aren't just sounds, they're invitations to feel, to slow down, to remember that not everything must be understood to be real. "I used to think the silence was peace," the first voice murmurs. "And now?" the other asks. "Now I think the noise is peace too, if you let it be." There's no secret message encoded in the static, and yet there's something undeniable in its presence. Maybe the signal isn't something to find, but something to join, to become part of, not by decoding, but by dissolving. So let it wash over you now. That hiss, that shimmer, that echo of everything and nothing. Don't rush to name it, don't try to capture it. Just let it pass through you like mist. You don't need to hear a voice. You just need to feel that you're not alone. Because in the end, even the chaos hums with company. Even the noise cradles meaning, if you listen with something deeper than attention. Let the static be your lullaby. Let it hold you in its nameless rhythm. There's no puzzle here, just presence. The day that refused to be named. It began like any other day. The curtain of morning drew back in silence with no announcement, no parade. Just light, just breathe. But unlike the others, this one didn't beg for a name. It didn't demand to be called successful or wasted. It asked for nothing but to exist. There's a quiet kind of rebellion in that, in refusing the pressure to classify every hour, to turn life into a spreadsheet of meaning. We're trained to rate our days, to assign value like we're grading experiences. A for productive, C- for sluggish, F for lonely. But what happens when we don't give it a grade at all? "I don't know what kind of day it is," she said softly, gazing out the window. He sipped his tea, calm and curious. "Do you need to know?" She blinked. "I thought I did, but maybe not knowing feels better. Because maybe the most sacred kind of time is the kind that doesn't ask to be understood. A moment not bent toward memory, not packaged for a story, just a breath, lived fully, like a river that never asks you where it's going. It just flows. You don't need to define everything to feel it. You don't need a title to hold space. Some of the most honest experiences in life are the ones that leave no trace, no caption, no calendar entry. A walk with no destination, a laugh that ends in silence, a feeling without an origin. "Was today good or bad?" he asked later. She shook her head slowly. "It just was. And for once, that's enough." There's deep rest in the unspoken. When we stop narrating ourselves through life, something shifts. The air grows softer, the shoulders drop, and we remember. We are not here to perform existence, but to breathe it. Let go of trying to name this night. Let go of that voice in your head that wants to wrap it up, summarize it, explain what it meant. Let the moment drift, nameless and real. Let it settle over you like mist, like the scent of rain that never says if it came from sorrow or joy, like a quiet train passing through your dream, never asking for a destination. Sleep may find you now or later. It doesn't need to be labeled either. Drowsiness doesn't care for categories. It just happens when you're ready or even before. So let the day go. Not as a good day, not as a bad day, but simply as a day that existed, without the burden of meaning. And if you're still listening, still half awake, know this: there is no wrong way to be here, no requirement to explain, no story you owe. Just let the silence hold your hand. Let this moment remain untouched by judgment, and let the next breath come without needing to know why. The next thought is already waiting in the shadows. But for now, let this one dissolve. No title, no conclusion, just peace. Let this night remain unnamed. Let it simply be. The child who stopped asking, why? There was once a child who asked why the sun followed them home, why leaves fell when they were still green, and why people cried during happy endings. The word why spilled from their mouth not as a demand, but as a dance, a wonder, a tiny rebellion against the dull edges of certainty. Every answer they received only deepened the mystery, and that mystery made life feel alive. But somewhere between the spelling tests and the quiet shame of being told, "That's a silly question," something changed. The why didn't disappear. It just retreated. "I used to ask a lot of things too," said one voice in the hush of night, lying in bed. "Did you stop because you found the answers?" "No," came the reply, soft and slow. "I stopped because the answers started sounding the same." There's a strange silence that comes with growing up. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hums with suppressed wonder. We learn to smile politely instead of asking why someone looks sad. We learn to nod instead of questioning why routines feel empty. Childhood curiosity gets replaced by adult efficiency. But beneath that stillness, the questions still breathe. And here's the paradox. Maybe growing up doesn't mean we stop asking, but that we start listening differently. Instead of shouting questions into the sky, we carry them like stones in our pocket, heavier, quieter, worn smooth by time. We don't always need words anymore. A glance, a sigh, or a sudden stillness can carry the same inquiry. Why do I feel this way? Why does this moment linger? Why does silence sometimes speak more than sound ever could? "Do you miss asking?" one voice whispered again. "I think I do," the other replied, "but maybe I'll try again tomorrow, quietly." So maybe the child who stopped asking why never stopped being curious. Maybe they just learned that some questions don't need answers, only presence. And maybe, in the hush of this night, that child still lives in you, waiting not for knowledge, but for permission to wonder again. Let your thoughts untangle. Let your questions rest beside you, not in urgency, but in tenderness. you don't need to ask tonight. Not everything needs to be solved. Sometimes the mystery itself is the lullaby. Let it sing you into sleep. The book with no last page. Somewhere near the end, you begin to realize there is no end. You've been reading a story, not out loud, not even with your eyes, but in your breath, in the way your thoughts move when you're quiet. Each thought like a sentence, each pause, a line break. You were waiting for the last page, that satisfying click of conclusion. But instead, the page just turns into another. Did I miss something? One voice whispers in the dark. Maybe it was never meant to finish, the other answers softly. This story doesn't climax. It doesn't resolve. It doesn't offer a moral tied in a bow. It fades. It reappears. It circles back to an earlier chapter with a word changed, just enough to feel like a memory instead of a plot point. And still, you keep reading, don't you? Even though there's no table of contents, no epilogue, only the act of turning, again and again. You were taught to seek endings, every show, every article, every thought wrapped up neatly. The job is either done or it isn't. The relationship either works or it breaks. You're either healed or you're not. But life isn't like that. Life is the book that edits itself while you're reading, and some pages are blank on purpose. A man once said, "I think I'll feel better when I understand." He meant it with the desperation of someone waiting on closure like a late bus. His friend just laughed quietly and pointed to the rain dripping off the roof. What if the best part is not knowing how it ends? Not knowing doesn't mean being lost. It means you're still walking. And sometimes, peace lives in that not knowing, that open door, that chapter that trails off not because the author gave up, but because it was your turn to write the next line. Have you ever reread an old journal? Thought you'd find a message, a map, a final say, and instead, you found yourself surprised. Not by what you didn't remember, but by how much you've already lived without needing to explain it. Even now you're holding on to this moment, listening with the part of you that doesn't need to understand, just to feel. It's okay if the meaning slips through. It's okay if you fall asleep mid-thought. That too is part of the story. And just as you feel yourself drifting, something familiar returns. A scene, a phrase, a voice you forgot was yours, not to conclude the tale, but to remind you that no story really ends. It just changes shape in silence. The page doesn't turn this time. It rests, the ink cools, but your breath continues the story. Close the book, even if it never finished. The final word isn't printed, it's felt, and you're already part of what comes next. The thought you never chose. It comes quietly, like fog through a window left ajar. A thought not shaped by you, not molded by memory or intention. It has no origin that feels familiar, no logic that you would claim as your own. Yet somehow, there it is, breathing softly in the background of your mind. A strange sentence, a worry that doesn't belong, a cruel suggestion you never wanted to hear. "Where did that come from?" one voice says. "I don't know. I didn't even mean it," the other whispers back. The room goes quiet again, but the thought lingers. You didn't invite it in. You didn't consent, but it arrived, like wind over a sleeping field, brushing every blade of grass without asking. The mind, we like to believe, is a fortress, with walls and gates and watchtowers, but perhaps that's the illusion. In truth, it's more like open land, undefended and vulnerable to whatever gust the sky decides to send. Sometimes those gusts carry beautiful things, ideas, inspiration, flashes of joy. Other times, they carry storm clouds, dark thoughts, cruel judgments, imagined disasters, and they don't always reflect who you are. They don't need your approval to exist. A woman once said, "I had a thought about dropping everything and running away. I didn't want to. I just thought it." And her friend replied, "Maybe the thought just passed through you, like a shadow crossing a river." Not every thought is an intention. Not every idea is your identity. Some are simply echoes, leftovers from what you've read, heard, feared. You are not the source. You are not the sentence. You are the silence before the thought. The thought isn't your enemy, nor is it your truth. It's weather, and weather changes. The rain doesn't stain the sky. The storm doesn't own the wind. The question, then, is not whether the thought should be there. It already is. The deeper wisdom is knowing what to do with it. Hold it, or let it go. You might look at the thought gently, even thank it for reminding you how little control we truly have. Then watch it fade, like fog lifting from the hillside. No war, no panic, just recognition and release. Tonight, let the mind be a sky, wide, open, undisturbed. And when the next strange thought floats by, don't rush to own it. Let it drift. Let it dissolve. You are not its author, only its sky. The question that answered itself. It's late. The air hums with the weight of things unsaid, thoughts unshaped. You've carried this question for years, maybe without knowing it. What is love? Who am I? What if nothing matters? The words themselves aren't heavy. It's the silence that follows them, the kind that doesn't wait for an answer. You once searched for definitions, pages, podcasts, conversations that promised clarity. But every explanation felt like it missed the point, like trying to capture rain with a closed fist. The more you tried to define it, the less alive it felt. And yet, somehow, the question never left you. It followed you through heartbreak, through laughter, through quiet moments brushing your teeth when no one else was around. It didn't demand resolution. It simply existed, like a lighthouse that never moves, but still changes everything around it. In a quiet bookstore, someone once asked, "Do you think people change because they find answers, or because they start living different questions?" You didn't reply, but something in your body relaxed, as if it recognized something true without needing to prove it. Now, lying in the soft dark, you realize, maybe some questions aren't meant to be answered with words at all. They answer themselves in the way your breath softens when you see someone safe, in the way your voice breaks a little when you speak your truth, in the way you keep walking, even on days when meaning hides under the furniture. Earlier this week, two strangers waited in line for coffee. One asked, "Do you ever think we're all just echoing the same 5 questions in different accents?" The other smiled and replied, "Maybe. But I think that's the point, to echo until it becomes a song." The cup of coffee wasn't any warmer after that. The world didn't shift, but for a moment, the line felt like a cathedral, and both of them walked away with nothing solved, but something softened. There's a strange peace in not needing to know. You start to understand that the truest questions aren't puzzles to be solved, but doorways you walk through again and again until the walking itself becomes sacred. And you've been walking beautifully. So tonight, don't strain to answer. Don't reach for clarity. Let the question rest in you, not like a riddle, but like a seed. Something quiet, something becoming. If your thoughts drift, that's fine. If you forget the question entirely, that's even better. It means it's found its place inside you, no longer needing your mind to hold it, only your heart. Close your eyes if they haven't closed already. The answer isn't out there. It isn't even in here. It is you. And maybe that's the most honest reply the night can give. Sleep softly now, right inside the question. The silence that answered first. Before there were sentences, there was still something that didn't need grammar or punctuation, a kind of presence that spoke without speaking. You might think of it as nothing, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that presses gently against your chest, not to weigh you down, but to remind you you're still breathing. And long before we called that breath life, silence already knew its name. The first night you ever remembered. Not the one with lullabies or stories, but the one where you heard nothing. Just the soft exhale of a ceiling fan, the slow creak of settling wood, and the quiet awareness that something was there, even if you couldn't point to it. That was the silence that answered first. It didn't interrupt. It didn't explain. It simply was. Do you ever feel like silence knows more than we do? I think it's the only thing that doesn't try to convince us. We've been trained to fear what isn't filled. We call it awkward, lonely, eerie. But what if we've misunderstood it? What if silence isn't the absence of meaning, but the source of it? Before we ever cried into the void or carved questions into the air, silence had already responded. Not in code, not in metaphor, but in being. In the way the ocean holds its breath just before a wave. In the stillness of dawn that arrives before the sun peaks over the horizon. That kind of silence, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but receives it effortlessly, is not a gap in the universe. It's the floor beneath it. Maybe we don't begin with sound. Maybe the universe didn't shout its arrival. Maybe it inhaled, paused, and held that fullness in perfect stillness. And in that stillness, everything potential existed. A breath held long enough becomes sacred, and a silence held long enough becomes symphonic. I used to talk to myself just to fill the quiet. Did it help? Sometimes, but now I think the quiet was trying to talk back. It's strange how much we seek comfort in explanations, in stories, in speech. Yet, when overwhelmed or in awe, we instinctively go quiet. At funerals, at births, during sunsets, in moments of love too big for words. The most honest responses aren't said, they're felt. Maybe that's why silence doesn't need a translation. It meets you wherever you are, across all cultures, all faiths, all minds. It doesn't argue or push, it simply surrounds. And the longer you stay with it, the more it feels like home. So tonight, don't rush to fill the space. Don't reach for a reason or force a meaning. Just listen, not with your ears, but with your breath. Because the silence that answers first doesn't speak your language. It speaks you. The self that watched without judging. There is a kind of seeing that doesn't rush to explain. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't demand resolution. It simply sits with you in the quiet, like an old friend who knows your every chapter but has no need to edit the ending. Long before the world taught you to measure your worth in reactions, there was this quiet part of you, the one that doesn't flinch when a memory stings, the one that doesn't cheer when a thought flatters. It watches, like the sky watches weather, letting it pass, letting it storm, letting it clear, but never mistaking the storm for the sky itself. It's strange, isn't it? How we spend so much of our waking lives trying to fix, label, improve, as if being human were some puzzle we must constantly rearrange. But sometimes, the deepest act of care is not intervention, it's permission. To feel without solving, to ache without dissecting, to notice without judging. A woman stands at a window in the early morning. The world is still. Her partner is asleep. There's no particular reason she's awake, no crisis to solve. But something about the way the light lands across the floor reminds her she exists. Not for anyone, not against anything, just is. Beside her, a small voice stirs, her own perhaps. "Why are you up?" She smiles without turning. "I don't know. I guess I just wanted to see something without naming it." That's what this watcher does. It doesn't try to make a moment meaningful. It lets the moment breathe on its own. And when your thoughts spiral, when you catch yourself replaying old embarrassments or preparing future defenses, this part of you doesn't shame the noise. It simply listens, like a stone listens to the river. You might wonder, isn't that passivity? Shouldn't I do something? But the watcher doesn't answer with action. It answers with presence. And presence has its own kind of power. So quiet it's easy to overlook. So strong it never needs to shout. Think about how many parts of you react on cue. The self that gets defensive. The self that hides. The self that explains too much. But this watcher, it has no reflex, no mask, no agenda. It just sees. And in that still seeing, you begin to feel less like a storm and more like the space the storm happens in. Two strangers exchange glances at a bus stop. Neither speaks. There's a knowing there, not romantic, not dramatic, just a shared, human silence. One of them chuckles. "Looks like the universe hit pause today." The other nods. "Yeah. And maybe we weren't supposed to fast forward anyway." Sometimes we think insight must come loud and bright, but some truths are whispered. The part of you that watches without judging, that part doesn't teach with words. It teaches by not reacting, by staying, by reminding you that who you are is not your thought, but the space beneath it. So tonight, let the commentator rest. Let the fixer, the planner, the inner critic curl up and dream. You're not required to solve anything right now. Let that ancient part of you, the one who watched before you even had a name, be your guide tonight. You've heard enough voices today. Let silence carry this one. And when you forget again, as we all do, don't worry. The watcher never leaves. It simply waits. Quiet, clear, unafraid. Let judgment sleep and let you begin. The future that never arrives. It's strange, isn't it? The way tomorrow lingers at the edge of everything, just out of reach, always dressed like promise, always hinting at transformation. And yet, no matter how close we get, tomorrow refuses to arrive, like a train we swear we hear in the distance. But when we look again, the tracks are still. You sit there, maybe in your bed or by the window, planning for it, making lists, running possibilities like film reels in your head. I'll rest when this is done. I'll be happy when that happens. But when you finally get there, where is there? It's shifted again. The future, it turns out, is a professional illusionist. And we are its faithful audience, clapping for a performance that never ends. "I just want to feel ready," one voice says. "But ready for what?" the other replies. "For life to start, for things to make sense." There's a pause, soft as breath. Maybe they already have. The truth we keep avoiding might be this. The future was never meant to be caught. It was meant to keep us walking, imagining, reaching. But peace? Peace doesn't run ahead. It sits behind the curtain, waiting for us to stop looking forward long enough to notice we're already home. How much of your day lives in almost done, almost there, almost better? But what if this moment, with its quiet breath and unpolished grace, is the destination we forgot we were allowed to love? Time is not a staircase to climb. It's a room we keep decorating with stories about later. We place our joy there, our relief, our worth. But later keeps dissolving into now, and still, we forget to notice. Maybe that's the rebellion, to stop running toward what never shows its face, to sit still in the only place that ever existed. So tonight, let the future remain in costume. Don't ask it to reveal itself. Don't chase it down. Instead, close your eyes. Feel the weight of this second. Hear the breath you didn't earn but were given. You've already arrived. There's nowhere else to go. Nothing more to become. Let that be enough, for now. The lie that felt like truth. The room is quiet now. Even the clock seems to hesitate between seconds. You breathe in, not deeply, not intentionally, just enough. And something soft presses against the inside of your mind. The memory of a story you once believed, and maybe still do. Not because it was true, but because it was kind. Have you ever held on to something you knew was false, but didn't want to let go? Maybe it was a version of someone that never really existed, or a belief about yourself that gave you the courage to keep going. We say we want truth, but truth doesn't always come with warmth. Sometimes it arrives cold, sharp, and too late. A girl once told her therapist, "I like thinking my dad loved me even if he never said it." Was she lying to herself, or just choosing the gentler version of a memory too heavy to carry raw? That lie helped her wake up, go to school, laugh with friends. It wasn't accurate, but it kept her afloat. And maybe that's a kind of truth too. Two strangers meet in a coffee shop. One holds the door and says with a soft smile, "This one's on me. Call it good karma." Neither believes in karma, not really. But both play along because kindness, even dressed in fiction, feels better than silence. There's a phrase people often whisper when explaining something they're no longer sure of. It made sense at the time. That sentence carries both regret and grace. It forgives the choices we made with incomplete maps. It lets us look back without tearing ourselves apart. Maybe we need these stories, not because they're accurate, but because they're companions. Little fables stitched into the lining of our days. The belief that things happen for a reason, that love leaves a mark, even if unspoken, that we are not alone, even in our worst hour. You see, truth and survival aren't always aligned. The brain isn't wired to chase accuracy. It chases meaning, comfort, coherence. That's why a well-told lie can feel safer than a disjointed truth. We cradle myths like nightlights, not because they're real, but because they keep the dark at bay. And sometimes, truth is overrated. Not in courtrooms or science labs, but in the quiet chambers of the heart. There, what matters isn't what's factual. It's what's livable. What gets us through the night. A comforting belief, a borrowed certainty, a story we tell ourselves until we're strong enough to tell another. A man once leaned over on the subway and said, "I told my kid her goldfish moved to a lake because I couldn't explain death." Was it wrong? Maybe. But her smile at bedtime, that was real. The sleep that followed, that was real too. So what is truth if it can't hold us? And what is fiction if it keeps us soft, kind, breathing? Tonight, let the edges blur. Let the myths you've worn like armor stay wrapped a little longer. Let them hum their lullabies, even if off-key. Not all lies are weapons. Some are blankets, worn, yes, but still warm. You are allowed to rest inside a story that once saved you. You can leave accuracy for the morning light. For now, just float. No one is asking you to be honest with the stars tonight, just honest enough to sleep. And if your mind returns later to question it all, that's okay. It means you're healing. Let the truth blur. Let the comfort stay. The next thought is waiting just ahead, already whispering its arrival. The body that remembered what the mind forgot. There are moments when the mind goes blank. The thoughts you once held close slip like sand through trembling fingers. Names, meanings, stories, all lost in the hush of forgetting. But in that silence, something stirs. A twitch in your shoulder, a deep breath drawn without instruction, the tightness in your chest when someone raises their voice. The body remembers, even when the mind does not. She once asked him, late one evening, "Do you ever feel like your body reacts before your thoughts catch up?" He smiled gently, eyes half closed. "All the time," he said. "It's like my breath knows danger before my mouth can speak it." There's a secret knowledge beneath the skin, not made of words, not bound by logic. It's the way your muscles coil before a fall, the way your pulse quickens when a familiar scent brushes by, the way your tears well up, not from a thought, but from a memory buried so deep it never needed to be named. Long after the mind forgets the heartbreak, the hand still pulls back from the heat of love. Long after the laughter fades, the chest still loosens when it hears that one song. The body is a journal written in pressure and pulse, in scars and softness. It records everything we've ever survived, not as a story to be told, but as a rhythm to be felt. "I thought I was over it," she whispered once, lying on her side in the dim blue light of early morning. "You probably are," he said, brushing a thumb against her hand. "But maybe your body just needs more time to catch up." We chase healing with books and words, with meaning and explanations. But sometimes, healing isn't about understanding. Sometimes, it begins the moment we stop trying to explain the pain and start sitting with it instead, breathing with it, listening to the quiet signals beneath the noise, the way your breath shallows when you're near certain people, the way your shoulders clench before you know why. These are not overreactions. They are messages. Your body is not broken. It is wise. It is slow in its language, patient in its knowing. And perhaps, more than answers, what it asks from you is presence. You don't need to remember everything. You don't even need to understand it all, because your breath does. Your breath remembers what is safe. Your breath remembers what is sacred. And most of all, your breath remembers the way home. So tonight, let the thinking stop. Let the questions go unanswered. Let your body guide you, one inhale at a time, through the soft corridors of forgotten memories and toward something gentler. Not a solution, but a surrender. The kind that feels like rest. Let your breath lead. It never forgot where you belong. The idea that refused to be defined. Some things slip through your fingers not because they're lost, but because they were never meant to be held. You try to name it. You try to own it with language, wrap it in syllables, bind it in definition. But the more you try, the more it wriggles out, like water cupped in shaking hands. Freedom, soul, love, words that promise meaning and deliver only echoes. You stand at the edge of a lake and ask, "What is stillness?" And the lake, in return, offers no speech, only reflection. Two people sit beside each other on a train. One turns to the other, gently breaking the shared silence. Do you believe in love at first sight? A pause. I don't know, the other replies, but I felt something that didn't need a name. Some ideas like that are not there to be explained. They're there to be experienced. The tighter you grip the concept of freedom, the more it floats upward, like steam from a winter cup. Try to describe a soul, and suddenly you're only describing its absence, like someone describing light from the shape of the shadows it leaves behind. A child once asked their grandfather, "What is kindness?" He didn't answer. He just took off his scarf and wrapped it around her shoulders. She never asked again, and maybe that's the truth of it. The most essential things are not for naming, not for categorizing or proving or indexing in footnotes. They move like wind, brushing past your skin, shifting your breath, rearranging you, without ever offering credentials. They resist language because they are larger than it, not in volume, but in spirit. Trying to define love is like trying to net the sky with your hands. You might catch a little wind, but you'll miss the vastness. Trying to nail down soul is like trying to bottle a melody. You might record the sound, but not the ache it leaves in your ribs. I heard something beautiful today, someone says, stepping off the bus. Their friend asks, "What was it?" They shake their head, smiling faintly. I can't explain. It was like hearing your name whispered by the universe. That's the language of the undefined, a language that doesn't use words but still speaks. Not everything in life is meant to be clear. Some feelings are designed to blur the edges of your knowing so you can soften into them. Some meanings bloom in ambiguity. Let this one bloom in you now. You don't need to pin it down. Let it hover, shapeless, like the silence before dawn. The wind doesn't need a name to be felt, and neither do you. Don't name it. Just feel it passing through. Your breath already knows how to carry it. Let it. The clock that forgot to count. There are nights when you lie down and the world unhooks itself from the ticking. The clock, once an impatient metronome tapping at your mind, suddenly grows still. You're left suspended, no longer in a minute, an hour, or a plan. Just here. A breath, a pulse, a quiet. Hey, have you ever had one of those naps where you wake up and don't know if it's morning or midnight? Yeah. It's like I left time behind, like I wasn't sleeping in hours, just floating. Time doesn't always tick. That's the illusion we wear by day. Calendars, deadlines, schedules whispering urgency into every breath. But sleep has no agenda. And in deep rest, something ancient unfolds. Minutes stretch, or they dissolve. Sometimes you close your eyes for what feels like an eternity. And when you open them, it's been 20 minutes. Other times, you dream of lifetimes only to learn you've barely begun to doze. The clock, that stubborn sentinel, shrugs its shoulders. For once, it has nothing to measure. This isn't dysfunction, it's design. In that sacred space of forgetting, your body finds what the hours could never give you. Repair without counting. Release without remembering. The linear melts into something softer, circular, like ripples in a pond, not footsteps down a corridor. I think I like the feeling when I wake up and can't tell what day it is, she murmured once. He smiled. Maybe that's when you're closest to who you really are, before the world reminds you. Because when time lets go, you stop being a machine of appointments and start being something else. A presence, a breath, a living painting. Each second becomes not a unit, but a texture, and your sleep, the artist, The canvas is your mind, slowly brushed with dreams you don't need to understand. Maybe time is less like a ruler and more like a mirror, reflecting back what you expect. When you stop expecting, it stops reflecting. The mirror fogs. And in that blur, in that beautiful not knowing, you begin to return to something real. What if the truest rest doesn't come from how many hours you get, but from the moments when you step outside of them altogether? Just for tonight, there's no rush, no late, no early. Just this room, this breath, this slow letting go. Let the clock forget you. Let it miss your name. You're not here to be measured anymore. You are not an entry in a schedule or a line on a timeline. You are the pause between, the sigh after the song. And that's enough. Let the clock fade. You're outside of time now. The meaning that was never yours to carry. There's a quiet moment, somewhere between waking and dreaming, where you feel the invisible weight pressing against your chest. Not the weight of your body, but the weight of everything that was handed to you. Expectations you never agreed to. Beliefs you didn't choose. Roles you woke up one day and found yourself already wearing, as if life had dressed you in them while you slept. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's story? One voice whispers in the dark. All the time, the other replies, soft and honest. Like I inherited a script, but never saw the first page. That script, the one written in someone else's ink, is heavy. It speaks in phrases like, be strong, even when you're tired. Make them proud, even when you don't know who they are anymore. Don't disappoint, even when the goalpost keeps moving. You carried all that meaning, as if your worth depended on it. And somewhere along the way, you forgot to ask if it ever belonged to you. The rebellion begins here, not with fire or fury, but with letting go, with daring to imagine that maybe meaning isn't something to carry like a stone in your pocket. Maybe it's something to notice, like wind passing through open hands. You don't need to keep the guilt your parents wrapped in silence. You don't have to bear the pressure society layered into your gender, your race, your name. You don't owe the world a purpose just to exist. Sometimes, letting go isn't giving up. It's giving back. Giving back the fear that never started with you. Giving back the definition of success that always felt like a cage. Then who am I without all that? The first voice asks, a little afraid. Maybe you're just you, the other murmurs, and maybe that's more than enough. In this stillness, you begin to feel something you haven't in a long time. Space. Space inside your chest. Space between your thoughts. Space to breathe, not for a role or a reputation, but for yourself. What if emptiness isn't a void, but a clearing? A field no longer cluttered by demands and definitions, a blank canvas waiting not to be painted, but simply appreciated for its silence. What if the meanings you were forced to carry were never yours to begin with? What if your soul was never broken, just buried under words that didn't belong to it? Tonight, you don't have to search for a new meaning. You can just breathe. Feel the inhale as a quiet act of defiance. The exhale as surrender. Nothing to fix, nothing to prove, nothing to explain. Let go of the stories that demanded you be more than human. Let them dissolve into the dark like ink in water. And as the last expectation melts away, something strange happens. You don't feel lost. You feel light. Drop the meaning. Keep the breath. That's enough for now. The stranger you already are. You close your eyes, thinking you know who's resting behind them. But something whispers otherwise, a soft echo, not in words, but in weight, a sense that parts of you remain untouched, like pages stuck together in a book you thought you'd read cover to cover. You've introduced yourself to the world 1,000 times. This is me, you say. And yet, a quiet part within wonders, is it really? In the rhythm of your routine, a version of you performs, waking, working, smiling at the right cues, retreating at the usual triggers. But beneath that, beyond the practiced lines and facial expressions, something else pulses. A stranger, tender and vast, walks the corridors of your inner world, waiting not to be fixed, but finally noticed. Do you ever feel like you're just skimming the surface of yourself? Every time I'm alone, it's like there's a whole language I haven't learned to speak yet, and it's mine. There are emotions you've never had the words to describe. They visit in dreams or in the stillness between distractions. There are hopes you've shelved, not out of shame, but simply from forgetting they mattered. Even the fear you carry, it's shaped by stories you never got to finish. You're not a final draft. You're a gathering storm of selves, some still forming, others quietly dissolving. It's tempting to believe we must know ourselves fully, as if we're puzzles with exact edges waiting to be solved. But maybe we're not puzzles. Maybe we're poems, meant to be read again and again, differently each time, never entirely understood. You're not lost. You're simply arriving at yourself. And that's not a flaw. That's the miracle. Think of the way a flower doesn't apologize for blooming in stages. First the bud, then the slow, uncertain opening. The same is true of you. There are chambers in your heart still in dusk, not yet touched by morning. There are questions you haven't dared to ask yourself, not because you're afraid of the answers, but because you sensed the questions alone were sacred. Sometimes I sit in silence and realize I miss parts of me I've never even met. Maybe that's the beginning of finding them. The ache is a lantern. This process isn't linear. Some days, you'll feel miles away from understanding. Other days, one quiet moment will feel like you've returned home to a version of you that's been patiently waiting. So tonight, as you lie in the dim hush of your room, don't rush to define yourself. There is no finish line, no final self to uncover. Only layers shifting like clouds, becoming clearer, then fading again. Let the unknown in you breathe. Meet yourself slowly. There's no deadline. The question that didn't want an answer. There are questions that sit in your chest like a pebble under the tongue, present, but not painful. They don't demand resolution. They don't scream for attention. They breathe with you, quietly, like a small ember you hold in your palm, unsure whether it's fire or warmth. You ask them not because you want to conquer them, but because they anchor you to a stillness the world forgets to value. Somewhere in the city, two people wait for the same crosswalk light. One of them says, not expecting much in return, "Do you think it ever really ends?" The other looks ahead at the blinking red hand and shrugs. Maybe that's not the point. Not every question needs to arrive at an answer. Some exist to open doors in your perception, not close loops in your logic. They are more companion than problem, following you through the years, sometimes silent, sometimes loud, but always there. In Zen practice, there's a kind of riddle that isn't meant to be solved. You sit with it. Let it agitate something subtle in you. What is your original face before you were born? That's not a problem. That's a mirror you didn't know you were holding. Somewhere in a small bookstore, a person lingers at the philosophy shelf. Their fingers pause over a weathered spine. The clerk nearby asks, Looking for something specific? They answer, not really. I think the question matters more than what I might find. Questions like this are doors that never fully open, but never close either. You live beside them. You grow old with them. They shape you not by offering a truth, but by inviting a softness, an alertness to wonder. The mind resists uncertainty. It seeks endpoints. But what if peace lives in the incomplete? What if wholeness is not what's finished, but what's felt deeply, even when unresolved? Someone once whispered during a long bus ride, "Sometimes I ask the same thing every year, but I no longer expect an answer. I just like that it stays with me." And perhaps that's the hidden gift, not clarity, but continuity. A question that doesn't close becomes a candle you carry into the dark, not to eliminate it, but to see your way through it, just enough. Tonight, let that question be near. Let it nestle against your ribs like a memory too shy to speak. Let it warm your chest like something not quite spoken, not quite solved, but felt. Sleep doesn't need you to solve yourself. It only asks that you surrender, even just for now. Keep the question close, not as a riddle, as a rhythm. You are not here to fix everything. You are here to feel what needs no fixing, to let some thoughts hover, to let some doubts rest gently in your breath. And if you fall asleep mid-thought, know this: the question will wait. It doesn't mind being unfinished. It never did. The memory that was never lived. There are moments when something moves within you, and yet you have no story to attach to it. A scent of burning leaves stirs sorrow in your chest. A photograph of an old temple sparks longing, though you've never stepped foot in that part of the world. A melody in a foreign tongue makes your eyes well up, as if your soul understood the lyrics before your ears ever did. And you wonder, where does this come from? Who is remembering this moment, if not you? "I don't know why this makes me cry," she whispers, holding a faded picture of a place she's never been. "Maybe it's not your tear," he replies. "Maybe it belonged to someone who came before you, and it traveled all this way." There's a strange tenderness to memories that were never lived. They don't arrive with context. They arrive like dreams, with feelings more real than fact, like fragments of a life that exists somewhere just beyond the visible, in that in-between space where time folds and meaning lingers. It's not déjà vu. It's not imagination. It's a knowing that bypasses explanation, a sensation of recognition not rooted in this lifetime. Sometimes you pass a stranger and your chest tightens, as if some lost version of you knew them deeply. Or you visit a ruin and your body sighs with the relief of homecoming. These aren't hallucinations. These are echoes, gentle reverberations of something older than your biography. Modern science might chalk it up to subconscious pattern recognition. Psychology might call it projection. But the soul has no use for such categories. The soul simply remembers without needing permission from the brain. And perhaps not all memory is personal. Maybe some memories are collective, inherited like the shape of your eyes or the rhythm of your breath. Maybe you carry grief that didn't begin with you. Maybe you are the vessel for a story that needed a voice and found your heart open enough to hold it. "Do you think we can miss things we never had?" she asks, her voice low. "I think we can grieve a history we never lived," he says, "and still be honoring it. That grief is not a burden. It's an invitation, not to solve, but to soften, to let the feeling move through you like rain through soil, quiet, cleansing, without explanation. So when something stirs in you without reason, don't demand clarity. Don't chase it down with logic. Let it be what it is, a memory without history, a whisper from a life unlived, a reminder that you are more than the sum of your conscious experience. Tonight, don't search your past for meaning. Let it come to you like mist on still water. No need to ask where it began. Just feel its presence. Let it pass through gently, like a memory that remembers you. The belief that dissolved in stillness. There are moments, rare, soft-spoken moments, when the noise inside you goes quiet, and you begin to notice something strange, not in the world, but in yourself. The things you once clung to don't feel as urgent anymore. The rules you recited, the beliefs you thought would save you, they don't disappear, but they begin to loosen, like knots untied by gentle rain. Two strangers sat beside each other in a quiet corner of a library. One had headphones in, the other held a book, but hadn't turned a page for minutes. "Do you ever believe in something so hard?" the one with the book asked suddenly. "That you stop seeing whether it still fits?" The other slid off one earbud. "Only every Tuesday, and some Mondays." They both smiled, not at the answer, but at the shared honesty. Sometimes you don't need an argument to change, just silence, and someone to witness it with you. Stillness has a way of revealing things not by force, but by absence. Without noise, we begin to hear. Without movement, we start to feel. Beliefs are structures built to survive chaos, but in peace, they sometimes outlive their purpose. Not because they're wrong, but because they're rigid. And we, soft creatures that we are, were never meant to live in cages made of certainty. It's like watching steam rise from a cup. You don't rush it. You just observe how what was once held inside slowly escapes into the air, dissolving, harmless, beautiful. Some beliefs are like that, held tightly at first, then released when you no longer need them to prove anything. In stillness, you may find yourself face to face with ideas you no longer believe in, but are still carrying like souvenirs from an old life. You don't need to fight them. You don't need to debate yourself. Let them fade. The quiet will take care of the rest. Someone once sat alone at a bus stop and said aloud, as if to no one, "I used to believe people needed to change for me to be okay." A passerby paused, then replied gently, "And now, they don't," the first said. "I just need to breathe deeper." The bus didn't come for another 10 minutes, but for both of them, something had already arrived. Stillness doesn't shout. It doesn't convince. It doesn't negotiate. It offers no evidence. It just stays. And in its staying, it invites you to soften too, to melt your certainties, to realize that perhaps truth isn't a thing to conquer, but a place to rest. There is no need to grip so tightly anymore. Belief can become a raft you use to cross a river and let go of once you reach the shore. If you're still holding it now, ask yourself gently, have you already arrived? Don't panic if you find your beliefs changing in the night. That's not failure. That's growth happening in the language of sleep. Stillness is your body's way of telling you, you don't need to explain. You just need to be. And if you've drifted off for a few moments, welcome back. You didn't miss anything. Or perhaps you missed exactly what needed to slip away. Let belief float. Let silence carry the rest. You're not here to hold on tonight. You're here to let go. Quietly, slowly, like snow melting into spring. The end that came without drama. There are endings that come like storms, loud, sudden, unforgettable. But some don't. Some arrive like dusk slipping behind the horizon, quiet, slow, barely noticeable. Not every ending explodes. Some simply exhale, like a tired breath finally let go after holding it too long. We grow up watching movies where endings come with orchestras, tears, grand gestures, a climax that shakes the soul, a scene that demands applause. So we wait for that in real life. We wait for closure to roar or hearts to crack open in visible ways. But the truth is, not all stories finish that way. Some end with a whisper, a final glance, a silence too full to name. Do you remember how it ended? I think it didn't. It just stopped feeling loud. Was that enough for you? It was strangely perfect. That's the kind of ending that lives in the bones rather than on the screen. A love that fades, not with betrayal, but with the soft decay of time. A season that doesn't announce its departure. But one day, the leaves just aren't green anymore. A friendship that dissolves not with a fight, but with space. More space. Until the calls stop. You begin to realize that peace doesn't always look like victory. It often resembles surrender, not in defeat, but in softness, in acceptance. You stop asking for the plot twist. You stop begging for fireworks. Instead, you feel the beauty in a candle burning to the end of its wick. It didn't go out because something blew it out. It simply used up its light with quiet purpose. There is a sacredness in these silent endings. The kind of closure that doesn't demand to be witnessed to be real. No curtain call. No final bow. Just a quiet knowing that it's time. That it was enough. That nothing more needs to be said. Did you get to say goodbye? I think we both knew we didn't need to. And was it hard? No. It was gentle. Gentleness is its own form of drama. One that doesn't beg to be remembered with fireworks, but leaves behind something more subtle. Calm. Like the final notes of a lullaby fading into sleep. Like the stillness after a long rain. That kind of ending asks for no stage. It only asks for your presence. And maybe that's the final gift of such quiet farewells. They leave room for reflection, not regret. They offer closure without spectacle. And when you think back, you don't remember noise. You remember breath. You remember the space that allowed healing to begin. So let this day end gently. Let it bow out without fanfare. Let it drift away without needing to prove itself. Not every ending needs to be a climax. Some are just enough. And in their quiet exit, they remind you that your peace doesn't have to be loud to be real. It just has to be yours. The thought that slept before you did. There's a moment too quiet to notice when the mind slips beneath you. Before your body gives up its weight to the mattress, before your breath slows into rhythm, a single thought vanishes. Not loudly, not with ceremony, but like a book quietly closing in another room. You don't even realize it left, only that the room is softer now. The walls breathe slower. I think I forgot what I was worried about, someone once said, half laughing, half yawning at the edge of midnight. And maybe that's the secret. You don't fight thoughts to sleep. You let them lose interest in themselves. A couple once sat at a train station bench. The woman stared down the tracks, her voice trailing somewhere behind her eyes. Did you hear that? He blinked. What? That silence between my thoughts. He tilted his head. Maybe it's your brain taking a nap before you do. The wind nudged a receipt off the bench. Neither moved to catch it. Sleep never knocks. It never demands. It just waits. Somewhere beneath your fifth unfinished worry, beneath the question you meant to Google, beneath the memory of something embarrassing you said 5 years ago. It's there, holding out its hand like a friend who doesn't need to talk tonight. Thoughts are dancers, but even they tire. Some twirl all day, pirouetting through plans and judgments and endless inner headlines. But eventually, even they wander off the stage, one by one, until the mind is an empty theater. The lights dim, and a hush takes its place. Maybe you thought you needed to solve something first, to remember that name, to make sense of the mood, to respond to one last message in your head. But your thoughts, they've already curled up. They left their shoes by the door. You didn't even hear them go. In a cafe lit by lamps that hum, a barista hands over the last coffee of the night. The customer hesitates, forgetting what they were going to say. Anything else? They smile. No, I think I'm good. I think I'm done thinking. And in that moment, the world nods. Not in approval, just in understanding. The brain, after all, isn't an engine. It's a bird's nest. Thoughts come and go, sometimes returning, sometimes not. But when they leave for the night, they rarely announce it. They just slip into the dusk, letting your inner sky regain its stars. So, don't wait for everything to make sense before resting. Let confusion stay unresolved. Let curiosity wander off. You are allowed to not finish thinking. Tonight, your mind lies down before you, and without needing permission, it sleeps. The rest of you will follow soon. The soul that needed nothing. In the quiet stillness of night, when all external noise has softened to a hush, a whisper stirs in the center of your being, gentle but undeniable. It doesn't ask you to achieve or to strive. It doesn't weigh you down with checklists of self-improvement or whisper that you're not enough. Instead, it simply rests within you like a flame that never needed fuel. This is the soul that needed nothing, whole, present, already enough. The world insists that you are a project. From the moment you wake up, the subtle commands begin. Heal this, change that, become more, want better. You scroll past endless prescriptions for fixing yourself, new morning routines, better habits, deeper insights. And while growth is sacred and effort can be noble, what if there was a place beneath all of that, a silent, sacred truth that said, you're already whole, right now, as you are. It's a rebellion in the gentlest form, a protest that doesn't shout but exhales, that doesn't push forward but quietly stays behind and listens. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the window, two voices met in this stillness. Do you ever feel like you're always repairing something in yourself? One asked, curled beneath a blanket. The other turned their gaze toward the soft rhythm of the rain. All the time. Like I'm some endless renovation project. One room gets cleaned, another falls apart. What if? The first voice offered hesitantly. What if nothing actually needs fixing? A long pause followed, not from confusion, but from recognition, as if both souls had touched a truth too familiar to be denied. Because maybe healing isn't about reshaping yourself, but about unwrapping the silence that was there before the noise. Maybe your soul doesn't need a glow up. Maybe it's already glowing, softly, steadily, beneath the surface. And maybe, just maybe, rest is not the opposite of transformation. It is transformation. The kind that asks nothing of you but your presence. In this moment, there is no need to seek proof. You don't need to become more spiritual. You don't need to upgrade your vibration. There is no test to pass, no enlightenment to earn. There is only being. You were not born to be a project. You were born to be. To breathe, to laugh, to ache, to stretch out beneath the stars and feel the world's breath against your skin. And even your scars. They do not demand fixing. They are not flaws. They are stories. They are places where light entered when you thought you were breaking. They are not brokenness. They are proof of wholeness surviving. So tonight, let the effort fall away. Let the books on becoming better stay closed. Let your thoughts soften until they float like feathers inside your chest. Let your breath, slow and steady, be enough. There's nothing to chase, nothing to reach, nothing to conquer. The journey ends not in victory, but in stillness. And the truth of it is this: your soul was never waiting to be completed. It was only waiting for you to notice. As the final breath of the day settles, you don't have to try anymore. No more mending, no more reaching. Just this space, this moment, this quiet rebellion of rest. Let your soul exhale. It already knows the way home. The light that didn't want to be seen. There are kinds of light we never speak of, not because they're insignificant, but because they don't ask for notice. They live not in brilliance, but in warmth, the kind that never blinds, the kind that doesn't interrupt a room when it enters, the kind that waits until you're alone and tired, and then quietly wraps around you like a blanket that remembers your shape. Some truths aren't meant to perform. They don't glitter like stars or rise like dawn. They hum. They stay still. They don't tell the world who they are. They simply are. You see, not all light wants to be seen. Some of it lives in the space behind your ribs, in the quiet moment after the apology you didn't owe, in the way you breathe slower when no one is watching, in the small gesture that wasn't witnessed but was still good. One evening, under the pale yellow bulb of a late-night bus station, two strangers shared a bench neither planned to sit on. "You ever feel like you've got something to give?" one said, "but you don't want to turn it into a performance?" The other smiled without turning. Maybe that's the most honest kind of giving, the kind that doesn't ask for applause. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was respectful, like both of them knew they'd said enough. Because sometimes, your light is not a lighthouse. It's a flickering tea candle on a rainy windowsill. It's not there to guide the world. It's there to remind you that you're still here, that your existence is not a message. It's a presence, and presence doesn't have to prove anything. We live in a culture that wants everything illuminated, every corner revealed, every thought expressed, every feeling translated. But there's a rare kind of courage in letting something stay soft, private, unshared, not hidden, but held. You don't need to be understood tonight. You don't need to explain the quiet thing you carry. You don't need the perfect metaphor. You don't need to trace your pain back to its origin or map your joy to a cause. You just need to feel it. Alone, if needed. Gently, without asking it to be more than it is. You are not dim for being quiet. You are not lost for not performing your healing. There is a light in you that has nothing to prove. It flickers softly, not because it's weak, but because it doesn't need to be loud. You are radiant, even when no one sees you. You are warm, even when no one notices. You are enough, even when you do nothing more than be. Let the need to be known take a breath tonight. Let your soul turn inward, not to hide, but to rest. The kind of light you carry doesn't need a stage. It needs stillness. And stillness is what you now enter. No spotlight needed. You are radiant, even in shadow. The pain that asked for nothing. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't lash out. It doesn't plead for help. It just lingers, like a shadow that never quite leaves the corner of the room. It asks for nothing. It simply is. And perhaps that's what makes it the hardest to name. It's late. The world outside is finally quiet. There's no email to answer, no role to play. And in this gentle stillness, something inside you stirs, a slow ache blooming behind your ribs. You feel it, that subtle tightness in the chest, that strange weight you didn't notice all day because you were too busy being okay. But now, there's nowhere to hide from it. Do you ever feel that pain just wants to sit next to you? Like it's not broken, just tired. Exactly. Like a friend who doesn't want advice, just a place to rest. There's a kind of wisdom in not fixing everything. The modern world teaches us to act, to solve, to move forward. But not everything broken is asking to be mended. Some wounds don't bleed, they whisper. And sometimes the most healing thing you can do is nothing at all. You lie there, not trying to push the feeling away, not labeling it as sadness or anxiety or regret. You simply notice it. You breathe with it. You allow it to exist. And in doing so, you give it the one thing it's always wanted: space. There is a profound difference between suppressing and witnessing. Suppressing says, "Go away." Witnessing says, "I see you." And pain, like any living thing, softens when it's seen. Not cured, not silenced, just held in presence, like a child no longer alone in the dark. Have you ever felt a sadness that didn't want to be solved? All the time. It just wanted me to sit with it. No words, no answers, just be there. And did it go away? But it stopped feeling like an enemy. The human heart isn't a machine. It doesn't break the same way. It bends, it remembers, it absorbs. And sometimes, it just needs the dignity of acknowledgement, of not being rushed toward healing. Because maybe healing isn't a destination. Maybe it's a companionship, walking with your pain rather than walking away from it. Tonight, you don't have to change anything. There's no need to reach a breakthrough, no need to analyze. The ache in your chest can simply sit beside you like a quiet companion at the end of a long day. It doesn't need to be talked out of existing. It just wants to be near someone who won't look away. You're not weak for feeling deeply. You're not broken for not having answers. What if the strongest thing you could do tonight was stay still? Breathe, feel. Let your presence be the comfort your pain never received. Let it rest beside you. It's tired too. The sky that held no message. There are nights when your eyes reach upward, not for answers, but for reassurance. The sky above is a scattered canvas of ancient lights, too far to hear, too distant to explain. And still, you search. Not with expectation, but with hope. Hope that somewhere in all that shimmer, a sentence waits. That maybe, just maybe, the stars remember your name. But tonight, they don't reply. They glitter as they always do, cool and unbothered, perfect in their detachment. There is no constellation whispering your fate, no comet hinting at a turning point, no invisible hand connecting those dots into a map of revelation. Just light, pure, silent, unapologetic light. Two people sit on a rooftop. One leans back, quiet, watching the horizon blur. "So, what do you think it all means?" the other asks, tracing a slow arc with their finger across the sky. "Maybe it doesn't mean anything," the first one says, almost smiling. "Maybe it just is. And that's enough." That's the soft rebellion tonight invites. Not against belief, but against demand. Against the need to extract meaning from every silence, every symbol. There is peace in surrendering that urgency, in realizing that beauty is not an explanation to be decoded. It doesn't owe you a reason. It just shows up. Somewhere, long ago, humans looked up and drew lions, virgins, and warriors in the dark. They named what they feared. They organized the chaos. That instinct still lingers in us. We want the sky to speak. We want it to say we're not alone, not random, not forgotten. But stars do not console. They do not narrate. They burn. They shine. They exist. And perhaps their true gift isn't prophecy. It's presence. Your breath softens as you lay still, aware now that not all silence is emptiness. Some silences are full, thick, kind. The kind that says, you don't need to understand everything to belong. In the grocery line earlier, someone stepped ahead, not out of rudeness, but need. You saw their trembling hand, the urgency in their face. And for once, you didn't demand an apology. You just let them pass. There was no message, no grand moment, but there was grace. That same grace lives in this sky, a sky that doesn't explain itself, that refuses to turn your gaze into prophecy, that asks nothing but your witness. Even the moon, hiding tonight behind a veil of quiet clouds, seems to agree. Let things be unspoken. Let beauty be unnamed. Maybe, just maybe, meaning isn't something the universe sends. Maybe it's something you feel when you stop asking, when you stop turning every moment into a puzzle, and instead, you simply rest under the sky, breathing, receiving. I think I like it better when it says nothing, the rooftop voice murmurs. The stars blink once more, not in reply, but in rhythm. So close your eyes, not to shut the stars out, but to let them in. Let their silence spread softly through you like warm water in a bath. You don't need them to speak. You're allowed to float in the wordless beauty of now. Let the sky shimmer without meaning. Let it be what it always was, endless, quiet, and enough. And when you're ready, look up one more time. Let the silence of the stars be your lullaby. The breath that forgot. It was breathing. Somewhere in the quiet hum between thoughts. Before dreams arrive, but after the day has said goodbye, you notice it. Then don't. The breath. At first, you're aware. Chest rising, chest falling. The cool air sliding in through your nose, the faint warmth as it leaves. But slowly, gently, that awareness dissolves like a sugar cube in warm tea. And then, you forget. Not because something is wrong, but because everything is finally right. "Are you still breathing?" she asked, half laughing, her voice barely above a whisper in the dark. He turned on his side, eyes closed. "I think so, but I'm not checking." "Good," she replied. "That's when you know it's real rest." There's a kind of trust the body holds in its bones, a wisdom so ancient it doesn't need reminders. You don't have to command your heart to beat or your lungs to fill. The body breathes because it remembers how, because it never forgot, even when your thoughts ran wild with worry and your chest felt tight with the weight of the day. In the stillness of night, without instruction, your breath finds its rhythm. It hums its lullaby without asking for applause. Inhale, pause, exhale. No performance, no fanfare, just being. This isn't about letting go in some grand cinematic gesture. It's quieter than that. It's the act of loosening your grip on control, just enough to remember you were never carrying yourself alone. Not really. The breath was always doing most of the work. Sleep doesn't come when you force it. Healing doesn't arrive with a demand. These things flow when you stop trying to pilot them with clenched fists and furrowed brows. He asked her once, on a night when his thoughts wouldn't stop tumbling, "How do you fall asleep when your mind won't shut up?" She smiled in the dark, eyes soft. "I don't try to sleep. I just let my breath walk me there. one quiet step at a time. And there it is, the path, not a sprint, not even a walk, a floating, like a feather caught in the gentlest wind. Let the breath become that wind. Let it drift in and out, unnoticed, unmeasured, unjudged. That's not carelessness. That's safety. The kind of safety your body recognizes before your mind does. The kind that says, you've made it through the noise. Now let go. You've spent enough hours counting steps, counting worries, counting what's next. But here, in this soft rebellion against the need to do, you are allowed to be. And in the stillness of just being, your breath continues its quiet work. It does not ask for attention. It only asks to be trusted. So now, let it carry you. Not like a passenger clinging to the rails, but like someone who has finally remembered what surrender feels like. Not surrender in defeat, but in peace. Let each breath remind you that rest is not earned through exhaustion, but through return. Return to the body. Return to the rhythm. Return to the breath that no longer needs your awareness. And if you forget your breathing, that's the sign. You've arrived. Just like that. The world that didn't need you tonight. Somewhere outside your window, life is still moving. Tires whisper down the street. A plane hums overhead. Someone turns off a hallway light. All of it continues, without needing anything from you. And for once, that's not a threat. It's a relief. You're not late to anything. You're not missing out. You're not falling behind in some invisible race that only your mind keeps score of. The world has enough motion tonight. You're not required to add more. There's something sacred about being unnecessary, about stepping out of the center. Tonight, you are not the answer to anyone's problem, nor the solution to any puzzle. You don't need to prove your worth, meet a deadline, or justify your stillness. Stillness just is. Two people pass on a quiet sidewalk. She's not replying to my texts. Feels like I've disappeared. You haven't. You've just paused. That's allowed. We live in a rhythm that rarely permits stopping. Even our pauses feel like they need explanation. Sorry I didn't reply. Just catching up. Been so busy. But the moon never apologizes for waning. The tide doesn't leave a note. Tonight, you are like that moon, that tide. You step back, not because you are fading, but because this is the shape you take when you rest. Somewhere, a door creaks shut. A book is placed on a nightstand. A kettle cools on its own. And none of it requires your energy to keep going. There's peace in that. A gentle voice in the dark. Hey, are you okay? I think so. Just quiet. Good. That's something too. You are not responsible for tonight's gravity. The sky doesn't lean on your shoulders. The world spins on its own axis. And tonight, it has you wrapped in orbit, not for action, but for belonging. You are not falling out of life. You are falling into rest. There's a kind of rebellion in that, a refusal to hustle, to answer, to perform. You are not abandoning the world. You are simply trusting it can float without your constant rowing, like trees that stand without moving, like oceans that retreat without shame, like stars that glow even when no one's looking. Let yourself become one of them. This moment is your uninvited permission slip, and you don't need to sign anything. Just be. Just lie here. You're already part of the world's quiet choreography. Let go of the idea that you're needed to make everything work. Let go of the pressure to matter every second. The world didn't need you tonight. And that's a kind of love too, because in the morning, it will still be here, and it will still be glad to see you. Now rest. You're not being left behind. You're being held. The wound that wasn't ashamed. There's a kind of silence that only arrives after the pain has spoken. It's not the silence of forgetting or dismissing, but the stillness that follows when something wounded inside you has finally been allowed to exist without shame. And tonight, in this quiet space where the world no longer demands performance, something within you dares to breathe. Do you think something's wrong with me? Why? Because I still hurt. Number that just means you're still listening. Somewhere along the way, we were taught to equate pain with failure, as if sorrow was a sign of weakness, as if the only goal was to get rid of it, silence it, bury it beneath productivity or perfection. But what if the pain was never the enemy? What if it was the invitation? You sit in your dim room, soft breath rising and falling, and you remember a moment, maybe years ago, maybe yesterday, when something cracked inside you. A heartbreak, a loss, a word that wounded. You didn't scream, you didn't fall apart. You simply carried it quietly, like a secret pressed beneath your ribs, and even now it's still there. But not as a scar, not as damage. It's open. And that openness feels strangely holy. Pain, it turns out, isn't just a symptom of what's wrong. It's often a doorway to what's real. It calls you back to yourself, not to the polished, filtered version you show the world, but to the raw, trembling, honest soul beneath. The part of you that still aches because it still hopes. The part that longs for truth more than applause. Sometimes I wonder if I should be over it by now. Over what? All of it. Maybe the point isn't getting over it. Maybe the point is letting it live without hiding. Shame likes to whisper that you're not enough, that your wounds make you less. But shame is a poor translator. What it calls weakness is often just sensitivity. What it calls unworthiness is often just openness. And what it calls broken is often just a place that never closed. Tonight, there's nothing you need to fix, no mask to hold up. The wound doesn't ask to be healed in this moment. It just asks to breathe, to be seen without judgment, to be cradled like something sacred, not hidden like something shameful. You're not here to win a war against your own softness. You're here to learn its language, to sit with the ache, not as a punishment, but as a proof. You're alive, still feeling, still human. So rest now. Let the wound stay open if it needs to. Let it sigh. Let it hum its silent lullaby. You don't need to cover it tonight. You don't need to explain why it's there. The world may ask for answers. But here, in this moment, only one thing is asked of you. Honesty. The kind that doesn't perform. The kind that lets even the most tender parts of you be enough. Tomorrow may ask for strength. But tonight, just let your wounds breathe. The darkness that didn't threaten. It begins not with fear, but with a hush, the kind that drapes over everything like a velvet curtain, not to obscure, but to soften. You lie there, and the light has left the room, but something in you exhales for the first time all day. What if the dark isn't where danger lives, but where rest begins? We've been taught that darkness is absence, the absence of sight, of control, of clarity. But tonight, maybe it's not about what's missing. Maybe it's about what's being offered, a space with no mirrors, no expectations, no roles. You don't have to be anyone in the dark. You don't even have to be awake. Just here. A low conversation ripples across a quiet night. I used to hate walking home without a streetlight, she says. Yeah, he replies, until you realize no one's watching. You just disappear into yourself a little. That's the quiet miracle of it, isn't it? Darkness isn't empty. It's intimate. The world wrapped in daylight is full of sharp edges. Light exposes. It asks you to show up, to smile, to prove. But when the lights dim, the proving pauses. You don't have to be strong here, or smart, or certain. The dark doesn't quiz you. It simply covers you, like soil around a seed. And seeds aren't scared in the dark. They grow. It's not performance anymore. It's presence. You are no longer the object of the gaze, no longer under the scrutiny of the world's fluorescent glare. The tension in your jaw that you didn't even notice begins to let go. The thought loops stop needing resolutions. Even your breath forgets to be perfect. It just is. And in that soft undoing, something re-emerges. Not the polished version of you, but the quieter one, the deeper one, the one who doesn't need permission to feel slow or sad or uncertain. That version stretches beneath the layers, safe in the knowing that here, in the dark, nothing must be explained. It's like walking into a room where no one knows your name, and yet no one asks for it, where your value doesn't depend on your answers. And the silence, it listens better than any person you've ever met. Sometimes, the mind plays tricks here, whispers, "You're alone." But aloneness isn't always abandonment. It can be sanctuary, like closing the door to a noisy hallway and realizing peace was waiting on the other side all along. In one quiet room, a conversation fades into night. "I can't see a thing," someone murmurs. "Maybe that's the point," the other replies. "You don't need to." Darkness then becomes not the opposite of light, but the invitation to not try, to stop climbing, stop explaining, stop rehearsing, just be breathed, just be held, and in the vast field of unlit space, your edges blur. You become less the doer and more the dream. The pressure lifts, the masks slip. The world goes silent, not as punishment, but as permission. So now, let the dark wrap around you like a familiar shawl, not cold, not hollow, but warm with the weight of ancient rest. It isn't here to harm. It's here to hold. Let it. Let go. The stage is empty now. No one is watching. And maybe that's where you begin again. Not with applause, but with peace. The voice that asked for nothing. In the hush of late hours, when the world forgets to perform, there emerges a voice inside you, a voice that doesn't ask for a microphone or chase attention. It doesn't boast or plead. It doesn't even need to speak to be understood. It simply is. And in its stillness, it carries the full weight of truth. This voice isn't shaped by applause or distorted by the need to win. It doesn't rise to defend your ego, nor does it crumple beneath judgment. It's the part of you that watches without comment, that feels without explanation. The part that has nothing to prove and yet contains everything essential. Do you ever feel like saying something, but then realize the silence says it better? Yeah, like when someone asks how you are, and you just smile. Not because you're fine, but because there's nothing that needs fixing right now. In moments of exhaustion, emotional or physical, that quiet voice is what remains. When you've said all the things you thought you were supposed to say, argued every corner of your mind, tried to justify your sadness, your hope, your complexity, that voice doesn't join the debate. It simply sits there, not passive, but peacefully rooted. And strangely, that silence within doesn't make you feel alone. It feels like being held, like someone you love placing their hand over yours and saying nothing, just being there. That's the miracle of it. It doesn't fight for meaning. It embodies it. We live in a world that teaches us to speak louder to be noticed, to brand ourselves, to narrate everything. But this voice, the one that never interrupts, reminds us of something more ancient, that you don't need a spotlight to be real, that maybe the deepest belonging doesn't come from being heard by others, but by not needing to be. What if the most honest part of me has no words? Then maybe it's not trying to be understood. Maybe it's already at peace. Even prayer in its purest form isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's a breath, a thought, a tear, a moment of presence when nothing is asked for and yet everything is given. This voice prays without language. It listens without needing response. It understands without expectation. Tonight, you don't need to explain yourself, not to others, not even to yourself. Let the voice that asks for nothing simply rest. It's already heard. It already belongs. And so do you. You are not invisible because you're quiet. You're not incomplete because you're still. You're not forgotten just because you're not performing. That inner voice, humble, unwavering, and silent, carries the memory of who you've always been, beneath the noise. So tonight, be still with it. Let it sit beside you like a trusted friend who knows all your stories without needing to hear them. Let it lead you not into noise, but into calm. Because sometimes, the most sacred things in life don't need to be said out loud. They simply need to be felt. The door that never closed. There's a door you didn't shut behind you. You thought you had. You thought drifting off would seal everything. The thoughts, the wondering, the soft unrest that walks the edges of your consciousness like a breeze around old curtains. But as your eyes begin to close, something stays open. A faint awareness, not of the world, not of responsibilities, not of anything that needs fixing, just of being. Two people sit beside each other on a nearly empty night bus. The hum of the engine is steady, like breathing. One of them turns and asks, almost without moving their lips, "Do you ever feel like sleep doesn't erase things, just lets them breathe differently?" The other nods, slow and quiet, like the questions don't stop, they just stop needing answers. That's where we are now, on that silent part of the ride. This journey was never about conclusions. It was never about uncovering the perfect logic beneath the chaos. It was about softening, melting gently into the mystery of being human, of not knowing, of choosing peace over precision. Every paradox, every strange echo of thought we wandered through tonight. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a flaw. It was an invitation. A space where you were allowed to not hold it all together. And you didn't fail. You deepened. What if you are not a puzzle to be solved, but a song that just needed quieter ears to be heard? What if rest isn't the end of awareness, but its softest form? There's a candle in the hallway that hasn't burned out, not because someone forgot it, but because it belongs there. It gives off no heat, but you can feel it. It doesn't light a path, but you're less afraid with it nearby. That's the awareness that stays behind tonight. Watching, not to evaluate, but to honor. It knows you're breathing. It sees you becoming. It accepts that some parts of you are still unfolding, and that's not a flaw. That's your rhythm. Maybe a barista hands someone their coffee and smiles. "I remembered the cinnamon. You always ask for it when you're having a hard day." That moment, small, unnoticed by most, is another door that stays open. Something in the world witnessing you without commentary, without agenda. That's the voice you carry into sleep now. The presence that doesn't try to steer, doesn't try to teach, just walks beside you, softly, invisibly, the kind of friend who doesn't knock, but leaves the porch light on, the kind of truth that doesn't speak, but stays. So let the breath carry you. Let it replace your thoughts with rhythm. Let it remind you that sleep isn't the end of your awareness. It's just where it takes its shoes off. No need to close the door. You're not leaving anything behind. You're simply resting in the arms of everything you already are. No more questions now. No more searching. You're not lost. You're home. And the door? It was never really meant to close. The rebellion that ended in peace. What if the boldest revolution doesn't sound like a war cry, but like a whisper? You began this journey with furrowed brows, clenching questions like weapons. Why does it all feel so heavy? What is the point? Is anyone else even awake in this world full of noise? You walked through thought like a battlefield, dodging the bullets of meaninglessness, hoping to find shelter somewhere within the silence. But now, here you are, at the edge of sleep, where the mind no longer wants to fight. Do you ever feel like everything has to make sense? One voice asks in the dim quiet of a bedroom conversation, neither hurried nor urgent. The other answers after a long breath. I used to. I thought peace would come from answers. Now I wonder, maybe peace is what happens when you stop asking. And maybe that's what this was about all along. A silent rebellion, not against the world, but against the belief that you have to carry it. You weren't trying to escape life. You were trying to lay it down, just for a little while. Not to run, but to rest. Not to fix everything, but to stop holding it so tightly. In the stillness, your breath becomes more than just air. It becomes a lullaby. Your heartbeat becomes a drum, not of war, but of surrender. And this surrender, this quiet falling into softness, isn't weakness. It's a sacred form of courage. It's the audacity to rest in a world that worships motion. You remember how it began, the tension in your shoulders, the pressure behind your eyes, the ache of pretending to have it all figured out. But slowly, moment by moment, you allowed yourself to loosen. Like untying a knot you didn't even know you had been wearing. You let go, not in defeat, but in faith, in trust. Trust that you don't have to earn rest, that sleep does not require justification, and that maybe, just maybe, you were never meant to fight every thought to the ground. You haven't solved anything tonight, and that's the beauty of it. This was never about conquest. It was about space, about softness, about letting the rebellion of stillness do what noise never could, bring you home to yourself. You still awake? The second voice murmurs. A pause, then a sigh. Not really, but I think that's the point. And now you drift. You, the gentle rebel. You, the silent witness of your own becoming. You, who no longer clings to the question, what does it all mean? Because tonight, the only answer is presence. The only goal is rest. You've done enough. You are enough. The rebellion is over, not with a bang, but with a breath. Let it all fade. Let it all go. You are safe. You are soft. You are asleep. So here we are, 3 hours later, still breathing, still unanswered, still whole. Did you notice when the rebellion stopped feeling like resistance and started feeling like rest? You see, the universe never promised meaning. It only promised presence. And tonight, you chose the rarest act of defiance in a world addicted to clarity. You surrendered, like a candle that chooses not to burn brighter, but to flicker, softer, like the sea that stops roaring and starts whispering to the moon. You didn't conquer the mystery, you became part of it, And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. So sleep now, not to escape the questions, but to float inside them. There is nothing more to do, no more to say. You are allowed to simply be. Good night, silent rebel.